London's fog hides a deadly secret. The Crimson Brotherhood, a cult wielding ancient blood magic, seeks to control the city with a mystical stone. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson plunge into a web of cryptic symbols, lethal traps, and betrayals, racing to stop a ritual that could enslave minds. From shadowy docks to sealed vaults, they battle the cunning Madame Vestra and the scarred Herald, uncovering a conspiracy deeper than they imagined. Will Holmes outwit the Brotherhood's hidden king, or will London fall to their crimson wrath? Chapter 1. The Mysterious Cipher. The fog hung thick over London, wrapping Baker Street in a gray blanket. It was a cold, damp evening in October, the kind that made your bones ache and your breath puff out in little clouds. Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire in his cozy sitting room at 221B, his long legs stretched out, a pipe in his hand. The warm glow of the flames danced across his sharp face, making his eyes glint like polished steel. Dr. John Watson, his loyal friend, sat across from him, scribbling in a notebook, trying to keep up with the detective's latest thoughts. "Holmes," Watson said, looking up from his notes, "you've been quiet for hours. What's on your mind?" Holmes didn't answer right away. He puffed on his pipe, sending a curl of smoke toward the ceiling. His eyes were fixed on something far away. Not the room, not the fire, but some puzzle only he could see. "Patience, Watson," he said at last, his voice low and calm. "The world is full of noise, but the truth speaks in whispers. I'm listening." Watson sighed. He was used to Holmes's strange ways, but that didn't make them any less frustrating. He set his notebook down and leaned back in his chair, ready to wait. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. Outside, the fog muffled the clatter of horse hooves and the shouts of street vendors. It was as if the world had slowed, holding its breath. Then came a knock at the door, sharp, urgent, 3 quick raps that cut through the quiet. Holmes's. Eyes snapped to the door, his body tensing like a cat about to pounce. "Enter," he called. Mrs. Hudson, their kind but fussy landlady, poked her head in. "Mr. Holmes, there's a young lady here to see you. Says it's urgent. She looks frightened half to death, poor thing." "Show her in," Holmes said, setting his pipe down. His voice was steady, but Watson could see the spark of curiosity in his eyes. A moment later, a young woman stepped into the room. She was no older than 20, with pale skin and dark hair pinned up under a simple bonnet. Her green eyes were wide with fear, and her hands clutched a small crumpled envelope. Her dress, though neat, was worn at the edges, hinting she wasn't rich. She stood in the doorway, hesitating, as if unsure whether to run or speak. "Miss, please sit," Holmes said, gesturing to a chair by the fire. His voice was gentle now, the way it got when he wanted to put someone at ease. "You are safe. Here, tell me your trouble." The young woman sat, her hands trembling as she smoothed her skirt. "My name is Emily Carver," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know where to start, Mr. Holmes. I'm so afraid." "Begin at the beginning," Holmes said, leaning forward. "And leave nothing out." Emily took a shaky breath. "It's my brother, Thomas. He's gone. 3 days ago, he left our house in Whitechapel and never came back. He's not the sort to run off, Mr. Holmes. He's steady, works as a clerk for a shipping company. But he's been acting strange lately. Secretive. He'd come home late, muttering about the Brotherhood and the cipher. I thought he was just tired. Overworked, maybe. But then I found this." She held out the envelope. It was plain, sealed with red wax, but there was no name or address on it. Holmes took it, his fingers moving carefully like he was handling a fragile clue. He broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Watson leaned over to look. The page was covered in strange symbols, lines, dots, and curves that made no sense. It wasn't any language Watson had ever seen. Holmes's eyes lit up the way they did when a puzzle grabbed him. "A cipher," he said, almost to himself. "Clever. Very clever." "What does it mean?" Emily asked, her voice tight with worry. "Thomas was holding that envelope the night before he vanished. He said if anything happened to him, I should bring it to you." He said you're the only one who could solve it. Holmes didn't answer right away. He held the paper to the light, turning it this way and that. His lips moved slightly, as if he were already working out the code in his head. Watson knew that look. Holmes was diving into the mystery and nothing would pull him out until he had answers. "Miss Carver," Holmes said at last, "tell me more about your brother. What is this brotherhood he spoke of?" Emily's hands twisted in her lap. "I don't know much. He only mentioned it once or twice and always in a whisper, like he was afraid someone might hear. He said they were powerful, dangerous. He said they were watching him." "Did he say why?" Holmes pressed. She shook her head. "No. But he was scared, Mr. Holmes. I've never seen him like that. Thomas is brave, always has been. But this was different. He looked like a man hunted." Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled under his chin. "And his work? This shipping company, what do they do?" "They move goods, mostly from the docks to warehouses," Emily said. "Thomas kept their books, made sure the numbers added up. He said it was dull work but steady. Lately, though, he'd been working late, meeting with men I didn't know. He wouldn't tell me who they were." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Describe these men." "I only saw one once," Emily said. "He came to our house about a week ago, tall, thin, with a red scarf. He had a strange way of talking, all polite but cold, like he didn't mean it. Thomas sent me out of the room, but I heard them arguing. Something about a shipment that wasn't right." Holmes glanced at Watson, a silent signal that he'd caught something important. Watson knew better than to ask what. It would come out when Holmes was ready. Instead, he turned to Emily. "Miss Carver, do you have any idea where Thomas might have gone?" "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I've looked everywhere. His office, the docks, even his favorite pub. No one's seen him. I'm so afraid he's... She couldn't finish. Tears welled in her eyes, and Watson handed her a handkerchief. There, he said softly. "Holmes will find him, he always does." Holmes was already on his feet, pacing the room, the cipher still in his hand. "Miss Carver, you've done well to bring this to me. Your brother is entangled in something dangerous, but I will find him. You have my word." Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I didn't know where else to turn." "Go home," Holmes said. "Stay safe. If anyone comes asking about your brother, say nothing. Lock your doors and keep your wits about you. I will send word soon." After Emily left, Watson turned to Holmes. "What do you make of it? This cipher, the Brotherhood. What's going on?" Holmes held up the paper, his eyes gleaming. "This, Watson, is no ordinary code. It's complex, layered, designed to hide its meaning from all but the sharpest minds. The Brotherhood, whoever they are, have gone to great lengths to protect their secrets. But they've made one mistake." "What's that?" Watson asked. "They've caught my attention," Holmes said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The next morning, Holmes was up before dawn, his energy like a storm trapped in a bottle. Watson found him at the breakfast table, surrounded by books, papers, and a map of London's docks. The cipher lay in the center, marked with Holmes' neat handwriting, notes, arrows, and numbers scribbled in the margins. "Have you cracked it?" Watson asked, pouring himself a cup of tea. "Not yet," Holmes said, not looking up. "But I'm close. The symbols are a mix of old alchemical signs and a custom alphabet. Whoever made this knows their history and their secrets." Watson peered at the paper. To him, it was still just a mess of lines and dots. "Any guesses about this Brotherhood?" Holmes leaned back, lighting his pipe. "They're organized, Watson. Powerful if Miss Carver's fear is any measure. The red scarf she mentioned, it's a clue. A symbol, perhaps, of their order. And this talk of a shipment, it suggests they're moving something valuable or dangerous." "Smugglers?" Watson asked. "Possibly," Holmes said. "But smugglers don't usually bother with ciphers this clever. This is something bigger, something worth killing for." Watson felt a chill. He'd seen Holmes tackle dangerous cases before, but there was something about this one, the way Holmes's eyes burned, the way he spoke of the Brotherhood, that made it feel different, darker. "What's our next move?" Watson asked. Holmes stood, grabbing his coat. We go to the docks. Thomas Carver's office will have answers. And if not, the streets will. Come, Watson. The game is afoot. The docks were a maze of noise and chaos. Ships creaked against their moorings. Men shouted as they hauled crates, and the air smelled of salt, tar, and sweat. Holmes moved through it all like a shadow, his eyes scanning every face, every corner. Watson followed, his hand near the revolver, in his pocket. He'd learned long ago that Holmes's cases often led to trouble. They found the shipping office, a small, grimy building tucked between warehouses. The sign read, Harrington and Sons, Imports. Inside, it was dim, the air thick with dust. A clerk, a nervous young man with ink-stained fingers, looked up as they entered. We're here about Thomas Carver, Holmes said, his voice sharp but polite. He works here, yes? The clerk's face paled. Thomas? He hasn't been in for days. Said he was sick. Holmes's eyes flicked over the room, taking in every detail. The cluttered desk, the locked cabinet, the faint smell of something metallic. Sick, you say? Did he leave anything behind? Papers, perhaps? The clerk hesitated, then shook his head. Nothing. He kept his desk tidy. Holmes smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. You're lying. I can see it in the way your hands shake. Now tell me the truth, or I'll make this very unpleasant. The clerk swallowed hard. All right. There was something. A notebook. He was always writing in it, hiding it when anyone came near. But it's gone now. I swear, I don't know where it is. Holmes leaned closer, his voice low. Who else asked about it? The clerk's eyes darted to the door. A man. Tall, with a red scarf. He came yesterday asking about Thomas. He scared me. Said if I talked to anyone, I'd regret it. Holmes straightened, his face unreadable. Thank you, you've been most helpful. Outside, Watson grabbed Holmes's arm. The red scarf again. This Brotherhood. They're closing in. Yes, Holmes said, his eyes scanning the docks. And they're watching us now. Watson followed his gaze. At the edge of a warehouse, half hidden in shadow, stood a figure. Tall, thin, a red scarf wrapped around his neck. The man met Holmes's eyes for a moment, then turned and vanished into the fog. Holmes didn't hesitate. After him, Watson. They ran, weaving through crates and sailors, the fog swallowing their footsteps. The man was fast, slipping through alleys like a ghost. Holmes was faster, his long strides eating up the distance. Watson struggled to keep up, his heart pounding. They chased the man to a narrow street, where he ducked into an old warehouse. Holmes slowed, signaling Watson to stay quiet. The door was ajar, creaking in the wind. Inside it was dark, the air heavy with the smell of oil and rust. Holmes stepped inside, his movements silent. Watson followed, his revolver ready. The warehouse was a maze of crates and barrels, shadows shifting in the dim light. Somewhere ahead, they heard a faint shuffle. Holmes raised a hand, listening. Then, in a single motion, he darted forward, grabbing a figure from behind a crate. It was the man with the red scarf. He struggled, but Holmes was stronger, pinning him against a wall. Who are you? Holmes demanded. What is the Crimson Brotherhood? The man sneered, his eyes cold. You're meddling in things you don't understand, Holmes. The Brotherhood is everywhere, you can't stop them. Holmes tightened his grip. Where is Thomas Carver? The man laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You'll never find him. The cipher will stay locked, and you'll be dead before you solve it. Before Holmes could ask more, the man twisted free, pulling a knife. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes was faster. He knocked the knife away, and the man bolted, disappearing into the shadows. Holmes didn't chase him. Instead, he picked up the knife, examining it. The blade was etched with a single symbol, a crimson circle with a slash through it. The same symbol from the cipher. We're getting closer, Holmes said, slipping the knife into his pocket. But we're also in danger. The Brotherhood knows we're on their trail. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread the cipher out on the table, his notes now covering every inch. Watson watched as he worked, his fingers tracing symbols, his mind racing. Hours passed, the fire dying to embers. Finally, Holmes leaned back, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "I've cracked it," he said. Watson leaned forward. "What does it say?" Holmes held up the paper, his voice low. "It's a message, a warning. The Crimson Brotherhood rises. The relic must not be found. Death to those who seek it." Watson's blood ran cold. "A relic? What relic?" Holmes's eyes burned with intensity. "That, Watson, is the key to this mystery, and I intend to find it before the Brotherhood does." Chapter 2. Shadows in Baker Street. The fog clung to London like a stubborn ghost, curling around the gas lamps outside 221B Baker Street. Inside, the air was warm but heavy with tension. Sherlock Holmes sat at his cluttered desk. The deciphered message from the Crimson cipher spread before him. The words, "The Crimson Brotherhood rises. The relic must not be found. Death to those who seek it," seemed to pulse on the page, daring him to unravel their meaning. Dr. John Watson stood by the window, peering into the misty street, his hand resting on the revolver in his pocket. "Holmes," Watson said, his voice low, "you're sure about that cipher? It's not just some madman's scribble?" Holmes didn't look up. His eyes were locked on the paper, his fingers tracing the inked symbols as if they might speak. "Madmen don't craft codes this clever," he said. "This is the work of a sharp mind, Watson. A dangerous one." Watson turned from the window, his face tight with worry. "And this relic they mentioned, what could it be? Something worth killing for?" Holmes leaned back, lighting his pipe. A thin stream of smoke rose twisting in the dim light. "Relics are often more than objects, Watson. They're symbols, power, secrets, or both. The Brotherhood's fear of it being found suggests it's a key to their plans, or their destruction." A sharp knock at the door broke the silence. Watson's hand tightened on his revolver. Holmes raised a finger, signaling calm, and called, "Come in." Mrs. Hudson entered, her face pale. "Mr. Holmes, there's a boy outside. Says he's got a message for you. Wouldn't give it to me. Insists on seeing you himself." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "A boy? Interesting. Send him up." Moments later, a scruffy lad of about 12 shuffled in. His cap was too big, slipping over his eyes, and his coat was patched at the elbows. He held a crumpled note in his grimy hands, his gaze darting nervously between Holmes and Watson. "Speak, lad," Holmes said, his voice firm but kind. "Who sent you?" The boy swallowed hard. "Dunno his name, sir. Tall bloke with a red scarf. Gave me a shilling to bring this to you and no one else." He thrust the note forward, eager to be rid of it. Holmes took the note, his movements slow and deliberate. The paper was cheap, the kind used in dockside taverns, and it smelled faintly of tobacco. He unfolded it, revealing a single line in bold, slanted handwriting. "Leave the cipher alone, Holmes, or the shadows will swallow you." Watson's jaw tightened. Another threat. They're bold, I'll give them that. Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. Bold, yes. But careless. This note confirms they're watching us, and they're afraid. He turned to the boy. "Where did you meet this man?" "Near the docks, sir," the boy said, shifting on his feet. "By the old fish market. He was standing in an alley like he didn't want to be seen." "Did he say anything else?" Holmes pressed. The boy shook his head. "Just to hurry and not tell no one. Looked nervous, though. Kept looking over his shoulder." Holmes slipped the boy a coin. "Good lad. If you see him again, follow him discreetly. Then come straight to me." The boy nodded, pocketed the coin, and scampered out. Watson shut the door behind him, his brow furrowed. "Holmes, this is getting dangerous. The Brotherhood's already threatened Emily Carver. And now us, what's next?" Holmes didn't answer right away. He held the note to the light, studying it like a map to buried treasure. "The ink," he murmured. It's fresh, not more than a few hours old. And this paper, common, but the tobacco scent is distinct. A blend from the East End, popular among dock workers. He set the note down, his eyes gleaming. They're close, Watson, very close. Then we should go to the police, Watson said. Lestrade? Holmes interrupted, his tone sharp. The police would stumble over their own feet and scare the Brotherhood into hiding. No, Watson, this is our hunt, sire. Sighed, knowing argument was useless. So, what's the plan? Holmes stood, grabbing his coat and scarf. We visit the fish market. The boy's description matches our man from the warehouse. If he's lingering there, we'll find him or his trail. The streets of London were a maze of shadows, the fog thicker than ever. The fish market near the Thames was a noisy, smelly place even at night. Stalls were closing, vendors shouting their last calls, while gulls screeched overhead. Holmes moved like a bloodhound, his eyes scanning every alley, every face. Watson kept close, his senses sharp for any sign of care. They reached the alley the boy had mentioned, a narrow, damp passage between two crumbling buildings. The air reeked of fish and rot. Holmes crouched, examining the ground. Footprints, he said, pointing to faint marks in the mud. Fresh. Our man was here and not alone. See the second set? Smaller, lighter. A woman, perhaps. Watson squinted at the tracks. You think it's Emily Carver? No, Holmes said. Her shoes were worn with a square heel. These are pointed, newer. Someone else is involved. They followed the footprints to a boarded-up shop at the alley's end. The windows were dark, the door padlocked, but Holmes's keen eyes spotted something. A thin scratch on the lock, fresh and shiny. Someone's been here, he whispered. Recently. He pulled a small tool from his pocket and worked the lock, his movements quick and silent. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, musty room. Inside, crates were stacked high, and the air smelled of damp wood and something sharp like chemicals. Holmes lit a match, casting flickering light across the space. Look, Watson said, pointing to a table in the corner. On it lay a pile of papers, a vial of red ink, and a single red scarf, folded neatly. Holmes moved to the table, his fingers brushing the scarf. The same weave as our friend from the warehouse, he said. The Brotherhood's mark. He rifled through the papers. Most were shipping manifests, lists of crates and dates, but one caught his eye. A map of London marked with red circles. One circle surrounded a church in Whitechapel, another a warehouse near the docks. A third, smaller circle marked a street, not far from Baker Street. They're planning something, Holmes said, his voice low. These locations, they're not random. The church, the warehouse, and this. He tapped the circle near their home. They're watching us, Watson, closely. Before Watson could respond, a noise came from the back of the shop, a soft thud, like a footstep. Holmes extinguished the match, plunging them into darkness. Watson's hand went to his revolver, his heart racing. Holmes moved silently, motioning for Watson to follow. They crept toward the sound, past crates, until they reached a narrow door. Holmes pushed it open, revealing a small back room. Moonlight spilled through a cracked window, illuminating a figure crouched over a desk. It was a woman, her back to them, rifling through papers. Her cloak was dark, but a red ribbon tied her hair, a subtle hint of the Brotherhood's color. Don't move, Holmes said, his voice cutting through the silence. The woman froze, then slowly turned. She was young, with sharp features and eyes that glinted with defiance. Who are you? Holmes demanded. And what do you know of the Crimson Brotherhood? The woman's lips curled into a smirk. You're Sherlock Holmes, she said. I've heard of you. Clever, but not clever enough. She moved suddenly, tossing a handful of papers into the air and bolting for the window. Holmes lunged, but she was fast, slipping through the cracked window like a cat. Watson ran to the window, but she was already gone, swallowed by the fog. Holmes gathered the scattered papers, his face grim. She's one of them, he said, and she was looking for something specific. He scanned the papers, more manifests, but one stood out. It was a letter written in the same bold handwriting as the note from the boy. The relic is secure. The ritual begins at the church. Ensure the cipher is destroyed. Watson's stomach churned. A ritual? Holmes, what are we dealing with? Holmes folded the letter, slipping it into his pocket. Something ancient, Watson. Something the Brotherhood will kill to protect. The church in Whitechapel is our next stop. They left the shop. The fog, thicker now, the streets eerily quiet. As they walked, Watson couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on them, shadows moving just out of sight. Holmes seemed unbothered, his mind already racing ahead to the next clue. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread the map and letter on the table, his pipe forgotten. The church, he said, tapping the red circle. St. Mary's in Whitechapel. Old, rarely used, perfect for secrets. If the Brotherhood is planning a ritual, it'll be there. Watson frowned. And Thomas Carver? You think he's caught up in this ritual? Holmes's eyes darkened. I think he stumbled onto something. He shouldn't have. The cipher was his warning and his mistake. The Brotherhood won't let him live if he knows too much. Watson gripped his revolver, the weight of it grounding him. Then we'd better move fast. Holmes nodded, his face set like stone. Tomorrow, Watson. We go to the church, but tonight we prepare. The shadows are closing in, and I intend to meet them head-on. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, and somewhere in the dark, the Crimson Brotherhood watched, waiting. Chapter 3. The Crimson Symbol. The dawn broke gray and cold over London, the fog lingering like a bad dream. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stepped out of a hansom cab near St. Mary's Church in Whitechapel, their coats pulled tight against the chill. The church loomed ahead, its spire half lost in the mist, its stone walls blackened by years of soot. The street was quiet, save for the distant clatter of a milk cart and the faint cries of a newspaper boy. Holmes's eyes scanned the churchyard, taking in every detail. The crooked gravestones, the overgrown ivy, the rusted iron gate creaking in the breeze. This place is more than it seems, Watson, he said, his voice low. Old churches often hide secrets, and this one reeks of them. Watson gripped his walking stick, his other hand near his revolver. You think the Brotherhood's here? Now? Holmes's lips twitched into a grim smile. If not here, then close. That letter mentioned a ritual. Churches are perfect for such things. Isolated, sacred, and full of shadows. They pushed through the gate, the hinges squealing. The churchyard was deserted, but Holmes paused, crouching to examine the ground. Footprints, he said, pointing to fresh marks in the damp earth. Several sets, heavy boots, and one lighter pair. Our friend with the red ribbon, perhaps. Watson followed as Holmes traced the prints to a side door, half hidden by ivy. The lock was scratched, just like the one at the dockside shop. Holmes pulled his tool from his pocket, working the lock with practiced ease. The door opened with a groan, revealing a dark, musty interior. Inside, the church was silent, the air thick with the smell of old wood and candle wax. Stained glass windows cast dim, colored light across the pews, painting the stone floor in shades of red and blue. Holmes moved like a hunter, his steps silent, his eyes darting to every corner. Watson stayed close, his heart pounding, every creak of the floorboards making him jump. At the altar, Holmes stopped. A faint mark caught his eye, a crimson circle with a slash through it, scratched into the wood. It matched the symbol on the cipher and the knife from the warehouse. The Crimson Brotherhood, Holmes said, his fingers brushing the mark. They've been here. Watson peered at the symbol. What does it mean? It's their sign, Holmes said. A mark of loyalty or a warning? Possibly both. He knelt, inspecting the floor. Look here. Dust disturbed recently. Someone's been moving things. He tapped the altar, listening to the sound. It was hollow. With a quick glance at Watson, Holmes pressed along the edges until a soft click echoed. A panel slid open, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending. Into darkness, Watson's stomach tightened. You're not seriously going down there, are you? Holmes lit a small lantern from his coat pocket, the flame casting eerie shadows. "Stay here if you like, Watson, but answers lie below." Watson muttered a curse but followed, his revolver drawn. The staircase was steep, the air growing colder and damper with each step. At the bottom they found a small chamber, its walls lined with ancient stone. In the center stood a wooden table, and on it a single object, a brass box, no bigger than a book, etched with the same crimson symbol. Holmes approached, his eyes gleaming. "Careful, Watson. This is no ordinary box." He examined it without touching, noting the intricate lock and faint scratches around it. "Someone tried to open this recently," he said, "but they failed." "Is it the relic?" Watson asked, his voice echoing in the small space. "Possibly," Holmes said, "or a clue to it." He pulled a magnifying glass from his pocket, studying the lock. "Complex but not unbreakable. I'll need time." A sudden noise cut him off, a scrape from above like boots on stone. Holmes doused the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Watson held his breath, listening. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, descended the stairs. A faint light flickered, growing brighter. Holmes pressed a finger to his lips, pulling Watson behind, a stone pillar. Two figures entered the chamber, their lantern casting long shadows. One was tall, cloaked with a red scarf around his neck, the man from the docks. The other was shorter, hooded, their face hidden. They moved to the box, speaking in low whispers. "The cipher's gone," the tall man said, his voice sharp. "Holmes has it. We should have killed the girl when we had the chance." The hooded figure shook their head. "Patience. The ritual is near. The relic will be ours and Holmes will be dead." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver, but Holmes's hand on his arm stopped him. The tall man knelt by the box, pulling tools from his cloak. "This lock's a devil," he muttered. "Carver said he could open it, but he lied." The hooded figure hissed. "Carver's a problem. If he talks, he won't," the tall man said. "He's hidden where no one will find him." Holmes's eyes narrowed, but he stayed still, listening. The tall man worked the lock, cursing under his breath. After a moment he stood. "We need the key. Without it, the box stays shut." "Then find it," the hooded figure snapped. "The Brotherhood won't wait. The ritual's tomorrow night." They turned to leave, but the hooded figure paused, sniffing the air. "Wait, I smell tobacco." Holmes tensed. Watson realized too late. Holmes's pipe, smoked that morning, had left a faint scent on his coat. The hooded figure spun, their lantern swinging toward the pillar. "Someone's here," they whispered. Holmes moved like lightning, shoving Watson toward the stairs. "Run!" he hissed. They scrambled up, the footsteps of their pursuers close behind. The church was a blur as they burst through the side door into the foggy churchyard. Watson's lungs burned, but Holmes didn't. Slow, leading them through twisting alleys until the church was far behind. They stopped in a narrow street, catching their breath. "That was too close," Watson panted. "They know we're onto them." "Yes," Holmes said, his face grim but excited. "And we know more than they think. Thomas Carver is alive, hidden somewhere. And that box, they need a key to open it. That's our next move." Watson frowned. "But where do we start? The key could be anywhere." Holmes pulled the letter from his pocket, the one from the dockside shop. This mentioned a ritual at the church. Tomorrow night. "We'll be there, Watson, but first, we need to know more about this Brotherhood. I suspect Thomas Carver's notebook, the one the clerk mentioned, holds answers." "Where do we look for it?" Watson asked. Holmes's eyes glinted. "The shipping office." The clerk was nervous, hiding something. If the notebook's anywhere, it's there. They hailed a cab, the fog swallowing the church behind them. Back at the shipping office, the clerk was gone, the place locked tight. Holmes picked the lock, in seconds, and they slipped inside. The office was as they'd left it, but Holmes went straight to the locked cabinet, forcing it open with a quick twist of his tool. Inside was a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Thomas Carver's neat handwriting. Holmes flipped through it, his eyes scanning rapidly. "Dates, shipments, names," he said. "And here, references to the Brotherhood." They're smuggling something, Watson. Not goods, but secrets. And this symbol, he pointed to a sketch, of the crimson circle with a slash. It's everywhere. Watson leaned over. Anything about the relic? Holmes paused on a page, his finger tracing a line. Here. The relic is the heart of their power, guarded by the Brotherhood, locked in brass. The key is with the keeper. The keeper? Watson said. Who's that? Holmes closed the notebook, slipping it into his coat. That's what we'll find out. Tomorrow night, at the ritual. The Brotherhood will be there, and so, will we. As they left the office, the fog seemed to press closer, the air heavy with unseen eyes. Watson felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the growing sense that the Crimson Brotherhood was more than a gang. They were a shadow over. London, and Holmes was stepping straight into their heart. Chapter 4. A game of trust. The fog had thinned by midday, but a gray chill still gripped London as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson sat in their Baker Street rooms. The notebook from Thomas Carver's office lay open on the table, its pages, a maze of names, dates, and cryptic notes about the Crimson Brotherhood. The crimson symbol, a circle with a slash, stared up from a sketch, as if mocking their efforts to understand it. Holmes's pipe sent curls of smoke toward the ceiling, his eyes fixed on the notebook like a chess player studying a board. Watson shifted in his chair, uneasy. Holmes, this ritual tonight at St. Mary's, it's a trap, isn't it? The Brotherhood knows we're sniffing around. Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. Of course it's a trap, Watson. But traps work both ways. They want to scare us off, but they've shown their hand. We know where they'll be and when. That's our advantage. Watson frowned, flipping through the notebook. This keeper, they mentioned, who could it be? And this key to the brass box. If it's not in the church, where is it? Holmes leaned forward, tapping a page. Carver's notes mentioned shipments to a warehouse near the docks marked with the crimson symbol. The keeper might be someone tied to those shipments, a guard, a leader, or even a traitor within the Brotherhood. As for the key, he paused, his eyes gleaming. It's close. I can feel it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Hudson entered, holding a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. This just came for you, Mr. Holmes. No name, no address, just dropped off by a lad who ran off quick. Holmes took the parcel, his fingers probing its edges. It was light, tied with coarse string. He cut it open carefully, revealing a single object, a small tarnished key, its head engraved with the crimson symbol. A note was tucked beneath it, written in the same bold hand as before. You're playing a dangerous game, Holmes. The key unlocks death. Watson's hand went to his revolver. They're taunting us now. How did they know we'd be looking for this? Holmes held the key to the light, inspecting it. They're not as clever as they think. This key is old, heavy, meant for something specific like the brass box. They sent it to scare us, but they've given us exactly what we need. He slipped the key into his pocket, his face set. We go to the church tonight, Watson. But first we need allies. Allies? Watson asked. You mean Lestrade? Holmes shook his head. Not the police. They're too clumsy for this. I'm thinking of someone closer to the streets. Someone who knows the Brotherhood's haunts. Watson's eyes widened. You don't mean Wiggins, Holmes said, standing. The Baker Street irregulars. Those boys see everything, hear everything. If the Brotherhood's moving in Whitechapel, Wiggins will know. They found Wiggins near the docks, tossing stones into the Thames with a gang of ragged boys. He was older now, nearly 16, but still sharp as a tack, his eyes bright with mischief. When he saw Holmes, he grinned and tipped his cap. Mr. Holmes, got a job for us? Holmes crouched to his level, his voice low. Wiggins, I need information. Men with red scarves or women with red ribbons moving near St. Mary's Church. Anything strange. Meetings, shipments, whispers about a Brotherhood. Wiggins' grin faded. The Crimson Brotherhood? I've heard talk, sir. Folks say they're ghosts slipping through the alleys. Seen a tall bloke with a red scarf near the church 2 nights ago, talking to a posh lady. She had a red ribbon in her hair, like you said. They went into an old tavern. The black anchor. Holmes handed him a coin. Good work. Keep your eyes open tonight. If you see them again, send word to Baker Street. Wiggins nodded and ran, off his boys scattering like sparrows. Watson watched them go, uneasy. You trust those kids with something this dangerous? Holmes started walking toward the black anchor. They're sharper than most Scotland Yard men, Watson. And they're loyal. Come, we have a tavern to visit. The black anchor was a grim, smoky place, tucked in a narrow street near the docks. The air inside was thick with the smell of ale and sweat, the tables crowded with sailors and dock workers. Holmes and Watson took a corner table, blending into the shadows. Holmes's eyes scanned the room, quick and sharp, missing nothing. A barmaid approached, her apron stained. What'll it be, gents? Information, Holmes said, sliding. A coin across the table. A tall man with a red scarf. A woman with a red ribbon. Seen them? The barmaid's eyes flicked to the coin, then back to Holmes. She leaned in, her voice low. Aye, they've been here. Last night, in the back room. Kept to themselves. Talking quiet, didn't like the look of 'em, too sneaky. What did they say? Holmes asked. She shrugged. Couldn't hear much. Something about a church and a ritual. Said a name, Carver. Sounded like they was planning to deal with him. Watson's heart sank. Thomas Carver? The barmaid nodded. That's the one. Poor sod. They didn't sound like they meant him well. Holmes slipped her another coin. If they come back, send a boy to 221B Baker Street, discreetly. She pocketed the coin and left. Watson leaned closer to Holmes. They're planning to kill him, aren't they? If he's still alive. Holmes' face was grim. Yes, but they haven't yet, or they wouldn't still be talking about him. We have time, but not much. As they left the tavern, the fog was creeping back, wrapping the streets in gray. Holmes paused, his eyes catching something. A flash of red in an alley across the street. He grabbed Watson's arm, pulling him into the shadows. A figure moved in the alley, tall and cloaked, a red scarf around their neck. It's him, Watson whispered, his hand on his revolver. Holmes shook his head. Not yet. We follow. They trailed the man through the twisting streets, keeping their distance. He moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder, but Holmes was a ghost, silent and unseen. The man led them to a run-down house near the church, its windows boarded. He knocked twice, then once more, and the door opened, swallowing him inside. Holmes, crouched by a cracked window, peering in. Watson joined him, squinting through the grime. Inside, a small group gathered. 5 figures, all wearing red scarves or ribbons. The tall man spoke, his voice muffled but urgent. Holmes has the key. We move tonight before he opens the box. A woman, the one from the warehouse with the red ribbon, stood. And Carver? He knows too much. Carver's secure, the tall man said. He won't talk, not yet. Holmes pulled back, his face hard. They're moving faster than I thought. We need to get to the church before them. The night was dark, the fog thick as soup. St. Mary's Church loomed. Ahead its spire a black shadow against the sky. Holmes and Watson slipped into the churchyard, moving silently to the side door. Inside, the church was empty, the air heavy with the same musty smell. They descended to the hidden chamber, the brass box still on the table, its crimson symbol, gleaming in the lantern light. Holmes pulled the key from his pocket, his hand steady. This is it, Watson. The moment of truth. He inserted the key, turning it slowly. The lock clicked, and the box opened, revealing a folded parchment and a small heavy object wrapped in cloth. Holmes unwrapped it, a stone medallion etched with the crimson symbol, its edges worn smooth. What is it? Watson whispered. Holmes studied the medallion, his eyes narrowing. A token, perhaps, or a key to something bigger. He unfolded, the parchment revealing a map, not of London but of an underground network, tunnels marked with the crimson symbol. At the center was a single word: sanctuary. Before Holmes could say more, a noise echoed above. Footsteps, heavy and fast. The Brotherhood had arrived. Holmes pocketed the medallion and map, closing the box. "Upstairs, Watson. Now." They scrambled up the stairs, hiding behind the altar as shadows moved in the church. Voices whispered, harsh and urgent. "The box is still here," the tall man said, "but Holmes has been inside. I can smell his tobacco." The woman's voice cut in. "Then we end this tonight. Find him." Holmes signaled Watson and they slipped out the side door, the fog hiding their escape. Back in the street, Watson's heart raced. "They're too close, Holmes. We can't keep this up." Holmes's eyes burned with determination. "We don't have to. This medallion, this map, they're the key to the Brotherhood's plans. We find their sanctuary, we find Carver, and we stop them." Chapter 5. The Vanishing Witness. The fog clung to London streets like a thief, stealing sound and sight as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson hurried away from St. Mary's Church. The stone medallion and the map from the brass box weighed, heavy in Holmes's pocket, each a piece of the Crimson Brotherhood's puzzle. The air was cold, sharp with the smell of coal and river muck, and Watson's breath puffed out in quick bursts as he kept pace with Holmes's long strides. "Holmes," Watson said, his voice low, "that map, those tunnels, where are they? And this sanctuary, is that where they're hiding Carver?" Holmes didn't slow, his eyes scanning the dark alleys they passed. "The tunnels are old, Watson. Likely part of London's forgotten underbelly. Smugglers' routes or plague pits repurposed by the Brotherhood. The sanctuary is their heart, where their secrets lie. If Carver's alive, he's there." Watson gripped his revolver, his nerves, Tarsia and the medallion. "What's it for?" Holmes patted his pocket. "A key, a symbol, or both. It's tied to their ritual. We'll know more when we find the sanctuary." They reached Baker Street, the familiar glow of 221B's windows a small comfort. Inside, the sitting room was warm, but the tension followed them. Holmes spread the map on the table, its lines tracing a web of tunnels beneath Whitechapel and the docks. The crimson symbol marked key points with sanctuary circled in the center near an old sewer line. Watson frowned. "How do we even get to these tunnels? And if the Brotherhood's watching, they'll know we're coming." Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling around him. "We need a guide, someone who knows the Undercity, and we need to move before the Brotherhood realizes we have the medallion." A sharp rap at the door cut through their talk. Mrs. Hudson poked her head in, her face tight with worry. "Mr. Holmes, it's that boy, Wiggins. He's in a state, says it's urgent." "Send him up," Holmes said, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. Wiggins burst in, his cap askew, his face smudged with dirt. "Mr. Holmes, it's bad. I saw her, the lady with the red ribbon. She was at the Black Anchor again, talking to a bloke. They mentioned Carver, said he's slipping away and they gotta move him tonight." Holmes leaned forward. "Where, Wiggins? Did they say?" The boy nodded, catching his breath. "Someplace called the Old Pump House near the docks. Said it's underground, hidden. But there's more, sir. They spotted me listening. I barely got away." Watson's heart sank. "You're not hurt, are you?" Wiggins shook his head, but his eyes were wide. "They're after me, Mr. Holmes. I saw their faces. Angry, like they'd kill me if they caught me." Holmes stood, his face hard. "You did well, Wiggins. Stay here tonight. Mrs. Hudson will look after you. You're safe now." As Wiggins nodded, Holmes turned to Watson. "The Old Pump House, it's on the map. Here." He pointed to a tunnel entrance near the docks, marked with the crimson symbol. "They're moving Carver, which means he's still alive. But we must act now." Watson grabbed his coat. "To the pump house, then?" Holmes nodded, slipping the medallion and map into his pocket. "Bring your revolver, Watson. This won't be a friendly visit." The docks were a maze of shadows, the fog thicker than ever. The old pump house was a crumbling brick building, half sunken into the ground, its rusted pipes jutting out like bones. The air smelled of damp stone and decay. Holmes examined the door, a heavy iron slab locked tight. Fresh scratches marked the lock, a sign of recent use. He worked his tool, the lock clicking open. Inside, the air was stale, the floor slick with moisture. A narrow staircase led down, swallowed by darkness. Holmes lit his lantern, the light revealing damp walls and the faint drip of water. "Stay close," he whispered. They descended, the air growing colder, the sound of their steps muffled by the damp. At the bottom, a tunnel stretched ahead, its walls carved with old graffiti, and the crimson symbol etched every few feet. Holmes paused, his lantern catching a fresh scuff mark on the floor. "They've been here," he said. "Recently, the tunnel split, one path leading deeper, the other curving toward a faint light. Holmes chose the lit path, moving silently. The light grew brighter, revealing a small chamber. Inside, a man sat tied to a chair, his head slumped. It was Thomas Carver, pale, bruised, but breathing. A single guard stood over him, a short, stocky man with a red scarf, sharpening a knife. Holmes signaled Watson, who nodded, his revolver, ready. In one swift move, Holmes stepped into the chamber, his voice sharp. "Drop the knife." The guard spun, startled, but didn't drop the weapon. "Holmes," he snarled, "you're a dead man." Before he could lunge, Watson fired a warning shot, the bullet grazing the wall. The guard froze, then dropped the knife, raising his hands. Holmes moved fast, binding the man's wrists with cord from his pocket. "Where's the sanctuary?" he demanded. The guard smirked. "You'll never find it. The Brotherhood's bigger than you know." Holmes ignored him, turning to Carver. He was conscious but weak, his eyes fluttering open. "Mr. Holmes," he whispered, "you found me." "Save your strength," Holmes said, cutting his ropes. "Can you walk?" Carver nodded, shaky. They wanted the key. I didn't tell them." Holmes helped him up, his eyes scanning the chamber. "We need to move. The Brotherhood will know you're gone soon." They retraced their steps, Carver leaning on Watson. The tunnel was quiet, too quiet. As they neared the stairs, a shadow moved ahead, a figure cloaked with a red ribbon in her hair. The woman from the warehouse. She stood blocking the exit, a pistol in her hand. "You're persistent, Holmes," she said, her voice cold. "But you've gone too far." Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes stepped forward, his hands empty. "Lower the gun," he said. "You don't want to do this." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think you can stop us? The Brotherhood is everywhere. The relic is ours, and Carver's a dead man." Carver's voice, weak but clear, cut through. "The medallion. It's not what you think. It's—" A shot rang out, not from the woman, but from behind her. She gasped, clutching her shoulder, and dropped her pistol. Wiggins appeared in the tunnel, holding a slingshot, his face pale but determined. "Told you I'd help, Mr. Holmes." The woman staggered, then fled, disappearing into the dark. Holmes didn't chase her. Instead, he grabbed Carver, pulling him toward the stairs. "Go, Watson, now!" They burst out of the pump house, the fog swallowing them as they ran. Carver stumbled, but Watson kept him upright, his heart pounding. They reached a main street, hailing a cab. Inside, Carver slumped against the seat, breathing hard. "Talk, Carver," Holmes said, his voice urgent. "What's the medallion? What's the sanctuary?" Carver's eyes were glassy, but he forced the words out. "The medallion, it's a key. To the sanctuary, the Brotherhood, they worship something old, something dangerous. The relic's there, in the tunnels. They'll kill to keep it hidden." "Where's the sanctuary?" Holmes pressed. Carver coughed, his voice fading. "Under the old brewery, near the river, but it's guarded. Traps." He passed out, his head lolling. Watson checked his pulse, weak, but steady. "He needs a doctor, Holmes." Holmes nodded, his face grim. "Take him to Baker Street. I'll meet you there. I need to check something." Watson frowned. "Where are you going?" "The brewery," Holmes said, stepping out of the cab. "The Brotherhood's moving tonight. I can't let them get ahead." Watson grabbed his arm. "You're not going alone." Holmes's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. You're needed here, Watson. Protect Carver, he's our only witness. Chapter 6. Whispers in the Fog. The fog wrapped London in a suffocating shroud, muffling the clop of hooves and the distant cries of night vendors. Sherlock Holmes moved alone through the maze of Whitechapel's alleys, his coat blending with the gray mist. The old brewery, Thomas Carver's last whispered clue, loomed in his mind. The medallion in his pocket felt heavier with each step, its crimson symbol a silent challenge. The Brotherhood was close. He could sense it, like a predator stalking its prey. Back at 221B Baker Street, Dr. John Watson paced the sitting room, his revolver on the table beside Thomas Carver, who lay on the sofa, pale and barely conscious. Mrs. Hudson hovered nearby, wringing her hands. "Will he be all right, Dr. Watson?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. Watson checked Carver's pulse again. Still weak, but steady. "He's been through a lot," he said. "Needs rest and a proper doctor, but he'll pull through if we keep him safe." Safe. The word felt hollow. The Crimson Brotherhood was out there, their red scarves and ribbons like bloodstains in the fog. Watson glanced at the window, half expecting to see a shadowed figure watching. "Holmes shouldn't have gone alone," he muttered. Carver stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Holmes. Where is he?" His voice was a rasp, barely audible. "He's following your lead," Watson said, leaning closer. "The brewery. Tell me more, Carver. What's in the sanctuary? What's the relic?" Carver's face twisted with fear. "It's old. Older than London. They worship it, say it holds power. The medallion opens the way, but the traps..." He coughed, wincing. "They'll kill him." Watson's stomach knotted. "Traps? What kind?" Carver's eyes closed, his strength fading. "Hidden doors, blades, poison. The Brotherhood protects the relic at all costs." Watson grabbed his coat. "Mrs. Hudson, lock the doors. Don't let anyone in. I'm going after Holmes." "But Dr. Watson..." she began. But he was already out the door, revolver in hand, the fog swallowing him whole. Meanwhile, Holmes reached the old brewery, a hulking ruin by the Thames. Its windows were shattered, its brick walls sagging under years of neglect. The air smelled of stale beer and wet stone. The map from the brass box burned in his memory, its lines pointing to a tunnel entrance beneath the brewery's cellar. He slipped through a broken gate, his lantern dimmed to avoid attention. The brewery's interior was a maze of rusted vats and splintered crates. Holmes moved silently, his eyes catching faint scratches on the floor. Recent, deliberate. The crimson symbol was carved into a beam, barely visible in the gloom. He followed its direction, finding a trapdoor hidden under a pile of debris. The lock was old but sturdy, etched with the same symbol. Holmes pulled the medallion from his pocket, its edges cold against his fingers. It fit the lock perfectly, clicking as it turned. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a stone staircase, descending into darkness. The air below was damp, heavy with the stench of mold and something sharper, chemicals perhaps, or blood. He descended, his lantern casting long shadows. The tunnel was narrow, its walls slick with moisture. Every few steps the crimson symbol appeared, guiding him deeper. But Carver's warning about traps echoed in his mind. He paused, examining the floor. A faint seam caught his eye. A pressure plate, cleverly hidden. He stepped over it, his heart steady despite the danger. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings, symbols, faces, and scenes of rituals long forgotten. In the center stood a stone pedestal, empty but marked with the crimson symbol. Holmes approached, his lantern revealing fresh footprints in the dust. Someone had been here, and recently. A faint noise, a scrape of stone, made him spin. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked, a red scarf around their neck. It was the tall man from the church, his eyes glinting with malice. "You're a fool, Holmes," he said, his voice low. "You think you can stop us?" Holmes stood his ground, his voice calm. "Where's the relic?" The man laughed, drawing a knife. Safe. You'll never touch it. But you'll die trying. Before he could move, a second figure appeared. A woman, not the one with the red ribbon, but older, her hair streaked with gray, a red sash at her waist. "Enough," she said, her voice sharp. "He's alone. Take him now." Holmes's eyes flicked between them, calculating. 2 against 1, and the tunnel was tight, no room to maneuver. He reached for his pocket, but the man lunged, knife flashing. Holmes dodged, the blade grazing his sleeve. He struck back, his fist connecting with the man's jaw, sending him staggering. The woman moved faster, pulling a small dart from her sash. Holmes saw the glint of poison on its tip and dove behind the pedestal as the dart flew past, embedding in the wall. "Clever," she hissed, "but not clever enough." A gunshot rang out, echoing in the chamber. The woman gasped, clutching her arm as Watson appeared at the tunnel's entrance, revolver smoking. "Holmes!" he shouted. "Get out!" Holmes seized the moment, grabbing the man's dropped knife and bolting for the tunnel. The woman screamed, "After them!" But Watson fired another warning shot, keeping her at bay. They ran, the tunnel's traps forgotten in their haste, the sound of pursuit close behind. They burst into the brewery, slamming the trapdoor shut. Holmes jammed the knife into the lock, buying time. The fog outside was their ally, hiding them, as they slipped into an alley. Watson panted, his face flushed. "That was too close, Holmes. You could have been killed." Holmes's eyes gleamed, undaunted. "But I wasn't. And we've learned something vital. The relic was on that pedestal, but it's gone. The Brotherhood moved it." Watson caught his breath. "Carver mentioned traps. You saw them?" Holmes nodded. "Pressure plates, likely more. The sanctuary's guarded like a fortress, but the woman, she's important. Not just a follower, she's high in their ranks." They hailed a cab, the fog muffling their tracks. Back at Baker Street, Carver was awake, sipping tea under Mrs. Hudson's care. His eyes widened when he saw Holmes. "You found it, the sanctuary?" "Not yet," Holmes said, pulling out the map. "But we're close. Tell me about the woman. Gray hair, red sash." Carver paled. "That's Madame Vestra. She's their keeper. Not just of the key, but of their secrets. She knows where the relic is." Holmes leaned forward, his voice intense. "And the relic? What is it?" Carver hesitated, fear in his eyes. "A stone, carved with symbols older than time. They say it holds power, control, influence. The Brotherhood believes it can sway minds, bend wills. They're planning to use it in the ritual to change things, power, politics, everything." Watson's jaw dropped. "That's madness." Holmes's face was grim. "Madness with purpose. If they control this relic, they control more than London." He stood, pacing. "We need to find Madame Vestra. She's the key now." A knock at the door made them jump. Mrs. Hudson opened it, revealing Wiggins, his face pale. "Mr. Holmes, they're comin'. Saw 'em near the church. Red scarves, movin' fast. They know you've got Carver." Holmes grabbed his coat. "Then we move first. Watson, get Carver somewhere safe. Wiggins, rally the irregulars, watch the streets. The Brotherhood's closing in, but we're not done yet." As Watson helped Carver up, Holmes slipped into the fog, his mind racing. The whispers in the mist were growing louder, and the Crimson Brotherhood was ready to strike. Chapter 7. The Brotherhood's Warning. The fog swirled thick around Baker Street, its tendrils creeping under doors and windows like a living thing. Inside 221B, Dr. John Watson stood guard over Thomas Carver, who sat hunched on the sofa, his face pale and drawn. The fire crackled, but its warmth did little to ease the chill in the room. Sherlock Holmes was out there, alone in the night, chasing the Crimson Brotherhood's trail to the old brewery. Watson's grip tightened on his revolver, his eyes flicking to the door with every creak of the house. Carver stirred, his voice weak. "Dr. Watson, you think Holmes can stop them? The Brotherhood, they're not just men. They're like shadows. Everywhere." Watson forced a reassuring nod. "Holmes has faced worse. He'll find this Madame Vestra and the relic. You just focus on staying strong." Carver's eyes dropped to his trembling hands. I tried to warn people. The shipments. The symbols. I saw too much. That's why they took me. Before Watson could ask more, a sharp thud came from downstairs. A heavy knock, deliberate and slow. Mrs. Hudson's voice called up, shaky. Dr. Watson, there's something at the door. A parcel, I think, but no one's there. Watson glanced at Carver, then grabbed his revolver. Stay here, he said, heading downstairs. Mrs. Hudson stood by the front door, holding a small, rough-wrapped package tied with twine. It was unmarked, but a faint red smear marked the paper, like a thumbprint in wax. Careful, Doctor, Mrs. Hudson whispered, her eyes wide. Watson took the package, his gut twisting. He carried it upstairs, setting it on the table far from Carver. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. He cut the twine with his pocket knife, peeling back the paper to reveal a folded note and a single red ribbon, coiled like a snake. The note was in the Brotherhood's bold script. Leave the medallion, return Carver, or Baker Street burns. Watson's blood ran cold. They know we're here, he said, his voice low. They're watching. Carver's face went ashen. They'll kill us all. You don't know what they're capable of. Watson shoved the note into his pocket, his mind racing. We need to move you, Carver, somewhere they won't look. Carver shook his head, his voice rising. There's nowhere safe. The Brotherhood, they see everything. They've got people in the docks, the taverns, even the police. Watson grabbed his shoulders, steadying him. Holmes will handle this, but we can't stay here. Mrs. Hudson, pack a bag, essentials only. We're taking Carver to my old surgery. It's quiet, out of the way. Mrs. Hudson nodded, hurrying off. Watson helped Carver to his feet, the man's weight heavy against him. As they moved toward the door, a faint creak came from the street outside, a footstep too close. Watson doused the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and peered through the curtains. Shadows shifted in the fog. Two figures, their silhouettes, marked by red scarves. They're here, Watson whispered, his revolver ready. Carver, stay low. The door rattled, the lock tested by a quiet, skilled hand. Watson's heart pounded, but he held his ground, aiming at the door. The rattling stopped, replaced by a soft scrape, a knife, perhaps, or a tool. Then, silence. Too much silence. Watson crept to the door, listening. Nothing. He cracked it open, revolver raised, but the street was empty, the fog swallowing any trace of the intruders. On the doorstep lay another note, pinned by a small dagger. Watson snatched it, retreating inside. The message was short. Time runs out. The ritual begins at midnight. Carver's voice trembled. The ritual? It's tonight. The relic. They'll use it. You have to tell Holmes. Watson nodded, his jaw tight. Mrs. Hudson, get Carver to the surgery. I'll find Holmes. He grabbed his coat, slipping the note and ribbon into his pocket. The fog was a wall outside, but Watson knew the streets well enough. He headed for the old brewery, his steps, quick but cautious, every shadow a potential threat. Meanwhile, Holmes crouched in the brewery's cellar, the trapdoor to the sanctuary tunnel locked behind him. The air was thick with damp and the faint tang of chemicals. His lantern cast a weak glow, revealing more crimson symbols carved into the walls, each one a taunt from the Brotherhood. The pedestal in the chamber stood empty, the relic gone, but Holmes's sharp eyes caught something new, a faint outline in the stone wall barely visible. A hidden door. He pressed along the edges, feeling for a catch. A soft click sounded, and the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage. The air inside was colder, the smell of decay stronger. Holmes stepped through, his lantern held high. The passage sloped downward, its walls slick with moisture. At its end was another chamber, larger, its ceiling supported by crumbling pillars. In the center, a circle of candles burned low, their wax pooling red on the floor. The crimson symbol was painted in the circle's center, fresh and wet. Holmes knelt, touching the paint. Not paint, blood. His pulse quickened, but his face stayed calm. The ritual's close, he murmured. But where's the relic? A rustle behind him made him spin, his hand on the knife in his pocket. A figure stood in the shadows, Madame Vestra, her gray hair glinting in the candlelight, her red sash stark against her dark cloak. Her eyes were cold, unyielding. "You're persistent, Holmes," she said. "But you're too late." Holmes stood, his voice steady. "Where's the relic, Vestra? What does the Brotherhood plan?" She smiled, thin and sharp. "The relic is power. It bends minds, shapes fates. Tonight, at midnight, we'll use it to remake London in our image. You can't stop it." Holmes stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "And Carver? What's his role?" Vestra's smile faded. "A fool who saw too much. He thought he could betray us. He's nothing now." Holmes's hand tightened on the knife. "He's alive, and he's talking." Her eyes flashed with anger, but before she could speak, a shout echoed from the tunnel. "Holmes?" It was Watson, his voice hoarse, his footsteps heavy as he ran into the chamber. He stopped, seeing Vestra, his revolver raised. "Step back, Holmes." Vestra laughed, unfazed. "You think a gun scares me? The Brotherhood is legion. Kill me and 10 more take my place." Holmes signaled Watson to lower the weapon. "She's baiting us, Watson. She wants us to act rashly." He turned to Vestra. "Tell me about the ritual. Where is it?" Vestra's eyes narrowed. "You'll find out soon enough, when you're dead." She moved suddenly, tossing a small vial to the floor. It shattered, releasing a cloud of acrid smoke. Holmes and Watson coughed, their eyes stinging as Vestra vanished into the shadows. Watson fired blindly, the shot echoing, but she was gone. Holmes grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the tunnel. "No time, Watson. The smoke's a distraction. We need to find the ritual site." They stumbled out of the brewery, the fog thicker now, the air heavy with the threat of midnight. Watson handed Holmes the Brotherhood's note. "They left this at Baker Street. They're watching us, Holmes, and they want Carver back." Holmes read the note, his face grim. "Midnight. The ritual's tonight and they're desperate. The sanctuary's our target, but we need to know exactly where." Watson's voice was tight. "Carver said it's under the brewery, but guarded. Traps," he said. Holmes nodded, his mind racing. "Then we prepare. We'll need light weapons and nerve. The Brotherhood's warning is clear. They'll kill to protect their relic. But I'm not ready to die yet." Chapter 8. A Trail of Blood. The fog pressed against London like a damp cloak, muffling the city's heartbeat as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson raced through the streets in a hansom cab. The note from the Crimson Brotherhood burned in Holmes's pocket, its warning: "Leave the medallion, return Carver, or Baker Street burns." A taunt that fueled his resolve. The medallion and map, taken from the brass box, were their only leads to the Brotherhood's sanctuary and the mysterious relic at its heart. Midnight loomed, the hour of the ritual, and time was slipping away. Watson clutched his revolver, his face tense. "Holmes, we're walking into a nest of vipers. The Brotherhood knows we have Carver, the medallion, everything. They'll be ready." Holmes's eyes gleamed in the dim cab light. "Let them be ready, Watson. They've made mistakes leaving notes, sending keys. Their arrogance is our weapon." The cab stopped near the old brewery, its crumbling silhouette barely visible through the fog. The air reeked of river mud and stale hops. Holmes led the way, his lantern low, his steps silent. Watson followed, his senses sharp, every shadow a potential threat. The brewery's trapdoor, hidden in the cellar, was still jammed with the knife Holmes had used to slow their pursuers. He pulled it free, the medallion's key turning smoothly in the lock. The tunnel below was colder now, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and something new: blood. Holmes paused, his lantern catching, a dark smear on the wall, fresh and glistening. "Recent," he said, his voice low. "Someone was hurt here not long ago." Watson's stomach twisted. Carver or one of theirs? Holmes knelt, examining the smear. Not enough for a fatal wound, but enough to mark a struggle. Follow the trail. The blood led deeper, small drops dotting the floor like breadcrumbs. The crimson symbol appeared on the walls, its slashes stark in the lantern's glow. The tunnel curved, narrowing, until it opened into a wider chamber. The air was heavy, the silence broken only by the drip of water. In the center, a crude altar stood, stained with more blood, its surface etched with the Brotherhood symbol. Holmes circled the altar, his eyes scanning every inch. "This isn't the sanctuary," he said. "A staging ground, perhaps. The blood's fresh, hours old. Someone was brought here, injured." Watson gripped his revolver tighter. "Madame Vestra?" Holmes shook his head. "Doubtful. She's too cunning to be caught off guard. This is someone else, a traitor maybe, or a sacrifice." A faint noise echoed, a low moan, barely audible. Holmes raised a hand, silencing Watson. He moved toward the sound, his lantern revealing a side passage. The blood trail thickened, leading to a crumpled figure against the wall. It was a young man, no older than 20, his face pale, his shirt soaked with blood. A red scarf hung loosely around his neck, torn and stained. Watson knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "He's alive, but barely. Stabbed, looks like. We need to get him out." Holmes's eyes narrowed. A Brotherhood member, betrayed by his own. Interesting. He searched the man's pockets, finding a crumpled note. It was scrawled in haste. "The keeper lied. The relic moves tonight. Trust no one." Watson looked up, his hands pressing the man's wound. He was warning someone, but who? Holmes pocketed the note, his face grim. "Perhaps Carver or another insider. The Brotherhood's ranks are cracking." He glanced at the man, who stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Holmes." The man rasped, his voice weak. You're too late. The ritual, it's not here. The sanctuary, deeper." "Where?" Holmes demanded, leaning close. "Where's the relic?" The man coughed, blood flecking his lips. "The old sewer under the brewery, but traps, fire, blades." His voice faded, his eyes closing. Watson shook his head. "He's gone, Holmes." Holmes stood, his jaw tight. "Not in vain. He's pointed us to the sewer. The map confirms it." He pulled the map from his pocket, tracing a line to a tunnel marked "Old Sewer Line, Sanctuary." Watson bandaged the man's wound as best he could, though it was clear he wouldn't survive long. "We can't leave him here." Holmes nodded. "We'll send for help, but we can't stop. The ritual's at midnight and it's nearly 11. They moved deeper, the blood trail fading but the crimson symbols guiding them. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing fouler, thick with the stench of rot and sewage. Holmes paused. At a fork, his lantern catching a glint of metal, a tripwire stretched across the path. "Careful," he said, stepping over it. Carver warned of traps. Watson followed, his heart pounding. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. The old sewer line ran through it, a sluggish stream of filth cutting the floor. At the far end, a heavy iron gate stood, etched with the crimson symbol. Beyond it, faint light flickered. Candles, perhaps, or torches. Holmes approached the gate, the medallion in hand. "This is it," he said. "The sanctuary." Before he could use the key, a shadow moved behind them. A figure, cloaked, a red ribbon in her hair. The woman from the warehouse, her shoulder bandaged from Wiggins's slingshot. She held a pistol, her eyes cold. "You're persistent, Holmes," she said, "but this is where it ends." Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes stepped forward, his voice calm. "You're alone. Your Brotherhood's fracturing. That man back there, he betrayed you." Her face twisted with anger. "He was weak, like Carver, like you'll be when we're done." Holmes's eyes flicked to the gate, then back to her. "The ritual's behind that gate, isn't it? You can't stop us alone." She laughed, raising the pistol. "I don't need to. The traps will." A click sounded underfoot. Watson's boot on a hidden plate. The ground rumbled, and a blade swung from the ceiling, gleaming in the lantern light. Holmes shoved Watson aside, the blade missing them by inches. The woman fired, the bullet grazing Holmes's arm as he dove for cover. Watson returned fire, forcing her back. She retreated into the shadows, her laughter echoing. Holmes clutched his arm, blood seeping through his sleeve, but his face was set. "The gate, Watson, now." He jammed the medallion into the lock, turning it. The gate groaned open, revealing a stone chamber lit by dozens of candles. Robed figures stood in a circle, their red scarves glowing in the flickering light. At the center, on a stone altar, lay a carved stone, the relic, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse. Madame Vestra stood before it, her red sash stark against her cloak. "You're too late, Holmes," she said, her voice triumphant. "The ritual begins." Holmes stepped forward, ignoring the pain in his arm. "Not yet, Vestra. Your man in the tunnel. He talked. Your secrets are unraveling." Her eyes narrowed. But before she could speak, Watson fired a shot into the ceiling, scattering the robed figures. "Move, Holmes," he shouted. Holmes lunged for the altar, grabbing the relic. It was heavier than it looked, cold to the touch. Vestra screamed, "Stop him!" As the Brotherhood closed in, knives flashing. Watson fired again, keeping them at bay. Holmes tucked the relic under his coat, dodging a blade as he ran for the gate. The chamber erupted in chaos, the Brotherhood's shouts echoing as traps triggered, spikes from the walls, a burst of flame from the floor. They reached the gate, slamming it shut behind them. Holmes jammed the medallion into the lock, breaking it. "That'll slow them," he said, panting. Watson supported him, his own heart racing. "You're hurt, Holmes, and we've got their relic. What now?" Holmes's eyes burned with determination despite the blood staining his sleeve. "We get to Baker Street. Carver needs to see this. He knows what it does." As they fled through the tunnels, the trail of blood behind them wasn't just from Holmes's wound. It was the Brotherhood's warning, now a promise of war. Chapter 9. The Hidden Sanctuary. The fog clung to London streets like a shroud, muffling the clatter of the hansom cab as it rattled toward Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes gripped the relic, a heavy carved stone etched with ancient symbols, his arm throbbing where the Brotherhood's bullet had grazed him. Dr. John Watson sat beside him, his revolver still warm in his hand, his eyes scanning the misty windows for signs of pursuit. The Crimson Brotherhood's sanctuary, hidden beneath the old brewery, was behind them, but its shadow loomed larger than ever. "Holmes," Watson said, his voice tight. "That relic, what is it? Carver said it could sway minds. Is that even possible?" Holmes's face was pale but focused, the relic cradled in his lap. "Possible? Perhaps. The symbols are ancient, Mesopotamian, maybe older. Such artifacts often carry myths of power. The Brotherhood believes it, and that's what matters. Belief drives men to madness." Watson glanced at the wound on Holmes's undrawn arm, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage. "You need a doctor, Holmes, and we need to get that relic somewhere safe." Holmes nodded, his eyes distant. "Baker Street first. Carver's our key. He knows more than he's told us." They reached 221B, the familiar glow of the windows cutting through the fog. Mrs. Hudson met them at the door, her face pale. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Holmes. Thank heavens. Mr. Carver's upstairs, but he's not well. Keeps muttering about the Brotherhood." Inside, Thomas Carver sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes wide with fear. The notebook from his office lay open on the table, its pages marked with the crimson symbol. When he saw the relic in Holmes's hands, he flinched. "You found it," he whispered. "The heart of their power." Holmes set the relic on the table, its symbols seeming to shift in the firelight. "Tell us everything, Carver. No more secrets. What does it do? Why do they want it?" Carver's hands trembled as he spoke. "The relic. It's called the Stone of Asher. They say it was carved by priests thousands of years ago, imbued with something, a force. The Brotherhood believes it can bend wills, make men obey. They want to use it to control London, politicians, bankers, anyone with power." Watson's jaw tightened. "That's insane. A stone can't do that." Carver's Eyes darted to the relic. Maybe not, but they've killed for it. I saw their rituals, blood, chants, the stone glowing. I thought it was nonsense until I saw things. Men acting against their nature, following orders they didn't understand. Holmes leaned forward, his voice sharp. The sanctuary. Where is it exactly? We found a chamber, but the ritual wasn't. There, Carver swallowed hard. Deeper. There's another level hidden behind the altar. A door, marked with the crimson symbol. The medallion opens it, but it's dangerous. Traps, guards. Madame Vestra runs it all. She's not human. I swear it. Watson frowned. Not human? Come now, Carver. Holmes held up a hand, silencing Watson. Fear makes men see demons, but Vestra's cunning enough to seem one. We need to find that door. He pulled the map from his pocket, tracing the lines. The sewer line. There's a second branch unmarked. That's our path. A sudden crash outside made them jump. Watson grabbed his revolver, moving to the window. The fog was thick, but shadows moved. 3 figures, red scarves glinting in the gaslight. They're here, he said, his voice low. Holmes stood wincing as he clutched his wounded arm. They're desperate. We have their relic, their key. Carver, can you walk? Carver nodded, shaky but determined. I'll try. Mrs. Hudson hovered at the door. What do I do, Mr. Holmes? Lock the doors, Holmes said. Barricade them. If anyone tries to get in, scream. Wiggins and his boys are watching the street. They'll fetch help. Watson helped Carver up, the relic tucked under Holmes's coat. They slipped out the door, back door, the fog their only cover. The streets were a maze, the Brotherhood's shadows close behind. Holmes led them toward the docks, his step sure despite the pain in his arm. The old brewery loomed ahead, its broken windows like empty eyes. They entered through a side door, the air heavy with the stench of rot. Holmes found the trapdoor, the medallion's key still in his pocket. The tunnel below was dark, the blood trail from their last visit now dry. They moved quickly, the crimson symbols guiding them to the chamber with the blood-stained altar. Holmes knelt, searching the stone. Carver, the hidden door. Where? Carver pointed, his hand shaking. There, behind the altar. Look for a seam. Holmes ran his fingers along the stone, finding a faint crack. He pressed the medallion against it and a low rumble sounded. The wall slid open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The air was colder, thicker, carrying the faint echo of chants. The sanctuary, Holmes said, his voice low. Stay close, Watson. They descended, the stairs slick with damp. At the bottom, a vast chamber opened, its walls carved with ancient symbols, lit by torches that cast flickering shadows. Robed figures stood in a circle, their red scarves stark against their dark cloaks. At the center was a stone platform, empty now but marked with the crimson symbol. Madame Vestra stood before it, her gray hair gleaming, her eyes locked on Holmes as he entered. You brought the relic, she said, her voice smooth but venomous. Good. Hand it over. And you might live. Holmes stepped forward, the relic in his hand. You've lost, Vestra. Your man betrayed you, your sanctuary's exposed. Her smile was cold. Exposed? You're in our domain now, Holmes. Look around. Watson's heart sank as more figures emerged from the shadows, dozens all wearing red, their knives and pistols glinting. He raised his revolver, but Holmes signaled him to hold. The relic's power, Holmes said. It's a myth, isn't it? You've built an empire on fear. Vestra's eyes narrowed. Myth or not, it binds us, and it will break you. She raised a hand, and the figures closed in, their chants growing louder, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in the stone. Carver whimpered behind Watson. The ritual, it's starting. Holmes tossed the relic onto the platform, a calculated move. Take it, he said, but you'll never use it. Vestra lunged for the stone, but as she touched it, a trap triggered, a hidden blade shot from the platform grazing her hand. She screamed, blood dripping as the Brotherhood faltered, their chance breaking. "Now, Watson," Holmes shouted. Watson fired into the ceiling, the sound deafening. The figures scattered, chaos erupting. Holmes grabbed the relic, pulling Watson and Carver toward a side tunnel. Blades swung from the walls, but Holmes dodged them, his memory of the traps sharp. They ran, the Brotherhood's shouts fading behind them. They emerged into the fog, the brewery's ruin a sanctuary of its own. Holmes clutched the relic, his face pale but triumphant. "We have it, Watson, but they'll come for it." Watson panted, supporting Carver. "Where to now? Baker Street's not safe." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The docks. We hide the relic, where they'll never look. A ship, ready to sail. Then we deal with Vestra." As they vanished into the fog, the Brotherhood's chants echoed faintly, a promise of vengeance yet to come. Chapter 10. Secrets of the Old Library. The fog hung heavy over the Thames, its damp fingers curling around the docks as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. John Watson, and Thomas Carver slipped through the shadows. The relic, a carved stone pulsing with ancient symbols, was tucked inside Holmes's coat, its weight a constant reminder of the Crimson Brotherhood's pursuit. Carver stumbled, his strength fading, but Watson kept him upright, his revolver ready. The Brotherhood's chant still echoed in their ears, a haunting promise of the ritual they'd barely escaped. Holmes led them to a small weathered ship moored at the dock's edge, its name faded but readable, the Sparrow. The deck was quiet, the crew asleep or gone. Holmes climbed aboard, motioning for Watson and Carver to follow. "We hide the relic here," he said, his voice low. "A ship ready to sail is the last place they'll look." Watson frowned, glancing at the dark. "Water? And then what?" "We can't keep running. They'll find us." Holmes's eyes glinted in the dim lantern light. "We don't run, Watson. We fight. But first, we need answers." Carver mentioned the relic's history, ancient, tied to rituals. "There's a place that might hold clues, the old library in Whitechapel." Carver nodded weakly, leaning against a crate. "I found records in my work, old books, hidden in the library's basement. They talk about the Stone of Asher, its power. The Brotherhood guards those secrets." Holmes tucked the relic beneath a loose plank in the ship's hold, marking the spot with a subtle scratch. "Then that's our next move, the library. But we must be quick, midnight's past and the Brotherhood will regroup." They left the ship, the fog their shield as they moved through the docks. The old library was a crumbling building, its stone facade cracked, its windows dark. The air smelled of dust and old paper as Holmes picked the lock, the door creaking open to reveal a cavernous room lined with sagging shelves. Moonlight filtered through high windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Watson helped Carver to a chair, his revolver still in hand. "This place feels like a tomb," he muttered. "You sure it's safe?" Holmes lit a small lantern, its glow barely touching the darkness. "Nowhere's safe, Watson. But knowledge is our weapon now." He turned to Carver. "Where are these books?" Carver pointed a shaky finger toward a staircase in the corner. "Basement. Locked room. I found it by accident checking shipments. The Brotherhood. They store things there." Holmes led the way, his steps silent on the creaking stairs. The basement was damp, the air thick with mildew. A heavy iron door stood at the end, etched with the crimson symbol, a circle with a slash. Holmes pulled the medallion from his pocket, its key fitting the lock perfectly. The door groaned open, revealing a small room packed with dusty tomes and crates. Holmes scanned the shelves, his fingers brushing leather-bound spines. "These are old, centuries some of them. Alchemical texts, ritual guides." He pulled a book, its cover worn, the title in faded Latin, De Potentia Lapidis. "The Power of the Stone," he translated, flipping it open. Watson peered over. His shoulder, the pages yellowed and brittle. "Anything about the relic?" Holmes's eyes moved quickly, scanning lines of cramped script. "Here," he said, pausing. "The Stone of Asher. carved by priests in ancient Sumer, said to channel, will bend minds to its bearer's command, used in rituals to sway kings, topple empires. He frowned. But it's incomplete. The ritual requires a blood sacrifice. Carver's voice trembled from the doorway. That's why they took me. I saw too much, tried to warn people. They meant to use me. For the ritual. Watson's jaw tightened. Monsters. And Madame Vestra, she's leading this? Holmes nodded, still reading. She's the keeper guarding the stone's secrets, but this book mentions a flaw. The stone's power fades without the right ritual, performed under specific stars. Tonight's alignment was their chance. A sudden noise above, a creak of floorboards made them freeze. Watson doused the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. Footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, descending the stairs. Holmes slipped the book into his coat, signaling Watson and Carver to hide behind a crate. A figure entered, holding a torch, that cast flickering light. It was the woman with the red ribbon, her shoulder still bandaged, her eyes sharp with anger. Behind her was a man, tall and cloaked, his red scarf stark in the gloom. They're here, the woman hissed. I smell that cursed tobacco. Holmes stepped out, his voice calm. Looking for this? He held up the medallion, its crimson symbol glinting. The woman's pistol snapped up. Give us the relic, Holmes, or we burn this place down. Watson raised his revolver from the shadows, his voice steady. Drop the gun, or you're done. The man with the scarf laughed, low and cold. You're outnumbered, Doctor. He whistled, and more. Footsteps sounded. 3 more figures, all with red scarves, blocking the stairs. Holmes's eyes flicked to the room's corners, calculating. You want the relic, he said, but it's not here. Kill us and you'll never find it. The woman's face twisted. You're bluffing. Holmes smiled faintly. Am I? Test me. She hesitated, and in that moment a small figure darted from the shadows, Wiggins, his slingshot ready. A stone struck the woman's hand, making her drop the pistol with a cry. Watson fired a warning shot, scattering the others. Holmes grabbed Carver, pulling him toward a side door he'd spotted earlier, hidden behind a shelf. Go, Holmes shouted, shoving the door open. It led to a narrow tunnel, likely an old smuggler's route. They ran, the Brotherhood's shouts, close behind. The tunnel was tight, the air foul, but it opened into an alley near the docks. Watson supported Carver, who was gasping, his strength nearly gone. Holmes paused, catching his breath. The book confirms the relic's power, but it's useless without the ritual. We've delayed them, but they'll hunt us now. Watson's face was grim. Where to? The ship? Holmes shook his head. Too risky. They'll watch the docks. We need a safe house, somewhere the Brotherhood doesn't know. Carver coughed, his voice weak. My sister, Emily. Her flat in Spitalfields. It's small, hidden. They won't. Look there. Holmes nodded. Good. Watson, get him there. I'll meet you after I throw them off. Watson grabbed his arm. You're not going alone again, Holmes. You're wounded. Holmes's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. I must. The Brotherhood's close, and I need to mislead them. Protect Carver and the book. I'll find you by dawn. Reluctantly, Watson nodded, helping Carver toward a cab. Holmes slipped into the fog, the medallion in his pocket, the book's secrets in his mind. The library's shadows held answers, but the Brotherhood's net was tightening, and the night was far from over. Chapter 11. The Masked Adversary. The fog draped London in a ghostly veil, swallowing the clatter of Dr. John Watson's cab as it rattled toward Spitalfields. Thomas Carver slumped beside him, his breathing shallow, the blanket around his shoulders barely keeping out the chill. The ancient book from the old library, De Potentia Lapidis, was tucked inside Watson's coat, its secrets about the stone of Asher weighing as heavily as the relic hidden on the sparrow. Watson's revolver rested in his lap, his eyes darting to the fogged windows, searching for red scarves or ribbons in the gloom. Stay with me, Carver, Watson said, his voice firm but kind. We're almost at your sister's. You'll be safe there. Carver's eyes flickered, haunted. Safe? Nowhere's safe from them. The Brotherhood. They see everything. Watson's jaw tightened. He thought of Holmes, alone in the fog, leading the Brotherhood on a false trail. The man's courage or recklessness never ceased to amaze him, but it left Watson uneasy. "Holmes will handle them," he said, more to himself than Carver. "He always does." Meanwhile, Sherlock Holmes moved like a shadow through Whitechapel's alleys, the medallion in his pocket and his wounded arm throbbing with every step. The Brotherhood's pursuit was close. He could feel it in the prickle at the back of his neck, the faint shuffle of boots in the fog. He'd left a deliberate trail, scuffed footprints, a dropped match, to draw them away from Watson and Carver. Now, he needed to lose them. He ducked into a narrow courtyard, its walls slick with damp. A faint light glowed ahead, a tavern's, lantern cutting through the mist. The sign read, "The Red Lion," a place known for rough company. Holmes slipped inside, blending into the smoky crowd of dock workers and petty thieves. He ordered a pint, his eyes scanning the room, waiting for the Brotherhood to take the bait. A figure entered, cloaked, their face hidden by a scarf, not red, but black, wrapped high. Their movements were deliberate, eyes scanning the crowd. Holmes's pulse quickened. This wasn't the tall man or the woman with the red ribbon. This was someone new, their presence commanding, dangerous. The figure paused, then moved to a corner table, sitting alone. Holmes approached, his voice low. "You're looking for me, I presume?" The figure's head tilted, revealing a glimpse of a mask beneath the scarf. Plain, white, with slits for eyes. "Sherlock Holmes," they said, their voice muffled, neither male nor female. "You've taken what's ours." Holmes sat, his posture relaxed but his mind racing. "The relic? It's safe. For now. Who are you?" The masked figure leaned forward, their eyes glinting through the slits. "Call me the Herald. The Brotherhood sends me when warnings fail. Return the Stone of Asher, or London will bleed." Holmes's fingers brushed the medallion in his pocket. "Threats don't sway me. Tell me about the ritual. What does the stone do?" The Herald's laugh was low, chilling. "You think you can unravel our secrets? The stone is power, control, obedience. With it, we'll shape this city's future." "You're a fly in our web, Holmes." Holmes leaned closer, his voice sharp. "A fly that's stolen your prize. Where's Madame Vestra? She's the keeper, but you're something else. Higher, perhaps?" The Herald stiffened, their hand slipping, beneath the table. Holmes caught the glint of a blade, but didn't flinch. "Vestra serves," they said. "As do we all, but you. You're a problem." A commotion at the tavern door broke the tension. Wiggins, breathless, bursting in. "Mr. Holmes, they're comin'. Red scarves, 3 of 'em outside." Holmes stood, his eyes locked on the Herald. "This isn't over." He tossed a coin on the table and slipped out the back, Wiggins at his heels. The fog swallowed them as shouts echoed from the street, the Brotherhood closing in. Back in Spitalfields, Watson helped Carver into Emily's small flat, a cramped room above a baker's shop. Emily Carver gasped when she saw her brother, rushing to his side. "Thomas, oh thank God, what happened?" "No time," Watson said, locking the door. "The Brotherhood's after him. We need to keep him hidden." Emily's eyes widened, but she nodded, helping Carver to a chair. Watson sat, the book on a table, its pages whispering secrets. "Emily, do you know anything about the Stone of Asher?" Thomas said it's tied to their rituals. Emily paled, glancing at her brother. "He mentioned it once, said it was dangerous, that the Brotherhood would kill for it. I thought he was paranoid." Carver coughed, his voice weak. "Not paranoid, I saw it, Emily, in the sanctuary. They chanted over it, used blood. It changed people." Watson's stomach churned. "Changed how?" Carver's eyes were distant. "Made them obey. Like puppets. I don't know how, but the stone, it's real." A soft knock at the door made them freeze. Watson gripped his revolver, motioning Emily to stay quiet. He cracked the door, expecting trouble, but found Wiggins, his face smudged with dirt. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Holmes sent me. He's leading them away, but they're close. Red scarves everywhere." Watson's heart sank. "Where's Holmes now?" "Dunno," Wiggins said. "Lost him in the fog, said to tell you to guard the book and Carver, he'll find you." Watson nodded, pulling Wiggins inside and locking the door. "Stay here. Keep watch." As Wiggins peered out the window, Watson turned to the book, flipping to the page Holmes had marked. The Latin was dense, but a passage stood out. "The stone of Asher binds the will, but only with blood and starlight. Its power wanes without the keeper's chant." A sketch showed the crimson symbol, circled by stars. Emily looked over his shoulder. "Stars? The ritual? It's tied to the sky?" Watson nodded, piecing it together. Holmes said the ritual needed a specific alignment. If they missed it last night, they'll try again. We need to know when. Carver stirred. "The book, it mentions a cycle. Every 7 years the stars align. Tonight's the last night." Watson's blood ran cold. "Then we're out of time." Outside, the fog thickened, but a shadow moved. A figure, masked, their black scarf blending with the mist. The herald. Watson didn't see them, but their presence lingered, a silent threat. Holmes, somewhere in the fog, was drawing the Brotherhood's attention. But the masked adversary was closer than he knew, their blade ready to strike. At the docks, Holmes crouched behind a crate, the Brotherhood's footsteps fading as he'd led them on a wild chase. His arm ached, but his mind was sharp. The herald's words echoed, "The stone is power." He needed to find the next ritual site, and fast. The book's secrets, left with Watson, were his only hope. Chapter 12. A dangerous gambit. The fog swirled through Spitalfields, a thick curtain that hid both friend and foe. Inside Emily Carver's cramped flat, Dr. John Watson stood by the window, his revolver in hand, eyes straining to pierce the gray mist. Thomas Carver sat hunched in a chair, his face pale, his breath shallow but steady. The ancient book, De Potentia Lapidis, lay open on the table, its pages revealing the stone of Asher's dark secrets. Emily hovered near her brother, her hands trembling as she poured tea, her gaze flicking to the locked door. Watson's voice was low, urgent. "Carver, you said tonight's the last night for the ritual. How do they do it? What's the chant?" Carver's eyes were haunted, his voice a whisper. "It's old words, not English. They stand around the stone, cut their hands, let the blood drip on it. The keeper, Madame Vestra, leads it. When the stars align, the stone glows. I saw it once. It's like it's alive," Emily gasped, clutching her brother's arm. "Thomas, why didn't you tell me?" "I was scared," he admitted. "They'd kill you if they knew I talked." Watson's jaw tightened. "We need to stop them. If Holmes doesn't find the ritual site soon," a soft tap at the window, "cut him off." Watson spun, revolver raised, but it was Wiggins, his face pressed against the glass, eyes wide. Watson opened the window, pulling the boy inside. "What is it, Wiggins?" "Mr. Holmes," Wiggins panted. "He's coming. Saw him near the bakery, but there's others. Red scarves, moving quiet. And someone else with a mask. Creepy, like a ghost." Watson's heart sank. "The herald." He turned to Emily. "Lock the windows, barricade the door. If anyone but Holmes tries to get in, scream." Emily nodded, her face pale but resolute. Watson turned to Wiggins. "You stay. Here, keep watch. If you see that masked figure, don't engage. Signal me." Wiggins nodded, clutching his slingshot. Watson checked the book again. It's Latin, dense but clear in parts. "The stone of Asher binds only under the 7th star's light, with blood and chant. Without the keeper, it sleeps." He frowned. "If we stop Vestra, the ritual fails." Outside, Sherlock Holmes moved through the fog, his wounded arm a dull ache, the medallion in his pocket a silent guide. The herald's words from the tavern echoed, "The stone is power." He'd led the Brotherhood on a false trail through Whitechapel, but the masked figure was different, more dangerous. Their black scarf and featureless mask marked them as a leader, not a follower. Holmes paused near the bakery, catching his breath. The fog was both ally and enemy. hiding him but cloaking his pursuers. He needed to reach Watson and Carver, but the Brotherhood was closing in. A faint sound, a boot, scuffing stone made him freeze. He slipped behind a barrel, his knife ready. A figure emerged from the mist, not a red scarf but the herald, their mask gleaming faintly. They moved with purpose, a blade in one hand, a small lantern in the other. Holmes held his breath, watching. The herald stopped, their head tilting as if sensing him. "Holmes," they called, their voice muffled but sharp. "You can't hide forever. Give us the stone, or we take it from your corpse." Holmes stepped out, his knife glinting. "You're bold, Herald, but you're alone. Your Brotherhood scattered." The herald's eyes glinted through the mask's slits. "Am I?" They raised the lantern, and shadows moved. 3 figures, red scarves, stark, emerging from the fog. Holmes' heart raced, but his face stayed calm. He was outnumbered, but he'd faced worse. "You want the stone?" Holmes said, his voice steady. "But it's not here. Kill me, and you'll never find it." The herald laughed, cold and low. "We don't need you alive, Holmes, just your pockets." Holmes moved suddenly, tossing a handful of dirt from the ground, blinding the nearest scarf wearer. He lunged, knocking the man down, but the herald was faster, their blades slashing. Holmes dodged, the knife grazing his coat. The other 2 closed, in but a sharp crack echoed. A slingshot stone striking one in the temple. Wiggins from a rooftop, his aim true. The herald spun, cursing as Holmes seized the moment, sprinting into an alley. The fog swallowed him, but the Brotherhood's shouts followed. He wove through Spittlefield's maze, his mind mapping the streets, until he reached Emily's flat. He knocked, 2 quick taps, 1 slow. His signal. Watson opened the door, revolver, ready. "Holmes, thank God, you're hurt." Holmes slipped inside, his breath ragged. A scratch. The herald's out there with others. They're desperate. Carver looked up, his face ashen. "The herald? They're Vestra's shadow. They enforce her will." Holmes set the medallion on the table, its crimson symbol stark. "The book, Watson, what did you find?" Watson pointed to the open page. "The ritual needs Vestra's chant and blood under the 7th star. Tonight's the last chance for 7 years. Stop her, and the stone's useless." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Then we draw her out. A gambit, Watson. We use the relic as bait." Emily's voice shook. "Bait? Here? They'll kill us." Holmes turned to her, his voice calm but firm. "Not if we're ready. Wiggins, get your boys. Spread word that the Stone of Asher's in this flat. Make it loud. Taverns, street corners. The Brotherhood will come." Wiggins nodded, slipping out the window. Watson frowned. "Holmes, that's madness. We're outnumbered." Holmes smiled faintly. "Numbers don't win wars, Watson. Strategy does. We fortify this flat, let them think they've trapped us. When Vestra comes, we take her." They barricaded the door with furniture, the windows with boards. Carver, though weak, helped Emily set traps. Ropes tied to chairs, pans to trip intruders. Watson loaded his revolver, his heart pounding. Holmes pored over the book, memorizing the ritual's details. An hour later, Wiggins returned, breathless. "It's done, Mr. Holmes, word's out. Red scarves are moving this way, and that masked one's with them." Holmes nodded, his face set. "Good. Everyone positions Watson by the door. Emily, Carver, stay low. When Vestra shows, we strike." The fog outside thickened, but the sound of footsteps grew. Slow, deliberate. A voice called, muffled by a mask. "Holmes, we know you're there. Give us the stone or we burn this place down." Holmes stood by the window, the medallion in hand, visible through a crack. "Come and take it," he called. A crash shook the door, the Brotherhood attacking. Watson fired through a gap, a cry signaling a hit. Blades scraped, and a torch flickered outside, its light dancing in the fog. The herald's voice cut through. "Enough games, Holmes, your time's up." Holmes signaled Watson, who tossed a chair through the window, startling the attackers. In the chaos, Holmes slipped the medallion to Carver. "Hide it. he whispered. "They'll think I still have it." The door splintered and the herald burst in, mask gleaming, blade raised. Watson fired, but they dodged, unnaturally fast. Holmes met them, knife in hand, their blades clashing in the dim light. The Brotherhood poured in, but Emily's traps tripped them, giving Watson time to fire again. Holmes grappled with the herald, their mask slipping, revealing a glimpse of a scarred jaw. "Who are you?" Holmes demanded, but they broke free, retreating as more scarves fell to Watson's shots. The Brotherhood fled into the fog, the herald's voice echoing. "This isn't over, Holmes," Holmes panted, blood trickling from a new cut. "They'll regroup. We've won this round, but Vestra's still out there." Watson helped Carver up, the medallion hidden in his coat. "What now?" Holmes's eyes burned with resolve. "We find Vestra before she finds us. The ritual's tonight, and she's our key to stopping it." As the fog closed in, the flat was a fortress, but the Brotherhood's shadow loomed, their masked adversary, a deadly promise of the fight to come. Chapter 13. The stolen relic, the fog pressed against Spitalfields like a living thing, its damp tendrils seeping through cracks in Emily Carver's flat. The air inside was thick with tension, the barricaded door splintered from the Brotherhood's assault. Sherlock Holmes stood by the window, his wounded arm bandaged but aching, his eyes scanning the misty street for signs of the herald or Madame Vestra. Dr. John Watson reloaded his revolver, his hands steady despite the chaos. Thomas Carver clutched the medallion hidden in his coat, while Emily stood guard with a kitchen knife, her face pale but fierce. The ancient book, De Potentia Lapidis, lay open, its secrets about the stone of Asher their only guide. Watson broke the silence, his voice low. "Holmes, that was too close. The herald's no ordinary thug, they're fast, cunning, and Vestra's still out there planning the ritual." Holmes nodded, his gaze distant. "The herald's a problem, but Vestra's the key. She's the keeper, the one who chants the ritual. Without her, the stone of Asher is just a rock." Carver's voice trembled. "The ritual. It's tonight, under the 7th star. If they get the stone back, they'll use it. I saw what it does. Men turn to puppets, obeying without question." Emily gripped her knife tighter. "Then we keep it hidden. They can't have it." Holmes turned, his eyes sharp. "They'll come again, and soon. We need to move the relic back to the Sparrow. It's safer there, and we can draw Vestra out." Watson frowned. "Back to the docks? They'll be watching the ship." Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Exactly. We let them think. They've won. A trap, Watson. We use the relic as bait, but we control the game." A soft knock interrupted. 2 quick taps, 1 slow. Holmes opened the door, revealing Wiggins, his face smudged with dirt, his slingshot tucked in his belt. "Mr. Holmes, streets are crawling with red scarves. They're watching the docks, the bakery, everywhere. Saw that masked one, too. Near the river." Holmes handed Wiggins a coin. "Good work. Spread word the relic's on the Sparrow. Make it loud, but don't get caught." Wiggins nodded, vanishing into the fog. Watson shook his head. "You're playing with fire, Holmes. If they get the stone—" "They won't," Holmes said, his voice firm. "Carver, you're with us. Emily, stay here, keep the flat locked. If anyone but us knocks, hide." Emily nodded, her eyes fierce. "Be careful, Thomas. Holmes." Watson and Carver slipped into the fog, the medallion with Carver, the book in Watson's coat. The docks were a maze of shadows, the air heavy with salt and tar. The Sparrow loomed ahead, its deck quiet, but Holmes's sharp eyes caught movement. A yow, flicker of red near a warehouse. "They're here," he whispered, pulling them behind a crate. "Watson, cover us. Carver, stay low." Watson gripped his revolver, his heart pounding. Holmes led them aboard, retrieving the relic from its hiding place beneath the plank. The stone of Asher felt cold, its symbols glinting in the dim light. Holmes tucked it into his coat, his face set. "We'll make them think it's still here." They slipped off the ship, but a shadow moved. A figure, cloaked, the herald's mask gleaming in the fog. "Holmes," their muffled voice called. "You can't run forever." Holmes stepped forward, the medallion in his hand visible. "You want the stone? Come for it." The herald lunged, blade flashing, but Holmes was ready, dodging and striking with his knife. Watson fired a warning shot, scattering two red-scarved figures who emerged from the shadows. Carver stumbled, clutching the medallion, as the herald's blade grazed Holmes's shoulder, drawing blood. "Enough," a voice boomed. Madame Vestra stepping from the fog, her red sash stark, her gray hair glinting. "Give me the stone, Holmes, or your friends die." Holmes held his ground, blood dripping. "You're late, Vestra. The ritual's time is passing." Her eyes narrowed. "The stars hold for hours yet. Hand it over." Holmes tossed the medallion, not the stone, to the ground. "Take it." Vestra lunged for it, but as she did, Wiggins' slingshot cracked, a stone striking her hand. She cried out, and Holmes grabbed the relic, shoving Watson and Carver toward an alley. "Run!" They sprinted, the Brotherhood's shouts close. The fog hid them, but Vestra's voice cut through. "You'll pay, Holmes. The stone is ours." They reached a safe corner, panting. Holmes clutched the relic, his face pale, but triumphant. "They took the bait. They think we left the stone." Watson's voice was tight. "But they'll know soon." "Where to now?" Holmes pulled the book from Watson's coat, flipping to a marked page. "The ritual needs a specific place, open to the stars. The book mentions a ruined chapel near the river. That's their next move." Carver's eyes widened. "The old chapel in Wapping. I heard them talk about it. It's where they'll try again." Holmes nodded. "Then we go there. Tonight, we end this." As they moved through the fog, the relic heavy in Holmes's coat, the Brotherhood's pursuit grew. Closer, Vestra's rage afire in the night. The chapel awaited, a final battlefield where the stone of Asher's power would be tested. Chapter 14. Into the underworld, the fog clung to London's edges like a thief, its damp chill seeping into Dr. John Watson's bones as he, Sherlock Holmes, and Thomas Carver hurried through the narrow streets of Wapping. The stone of Asher, heavy with its ancient symbols, was tucked inside Holmes's coat, a dangerous prize that drew the Crimson Brotherhood like moths to a flame. Holmes's wounded arm bled through its bandage, but his eyes burned with focus. The map from the old library etched in his mind. The ruined chapel in Wapping, Carver's whispered lead, was their target, the Brotherhood's last chance for their ritual under the seventh star. Watson gripped his revolver, his voice low. "Holmes, this chapel, if it's their ritual site, it'll be crawling with them. We're walking into a trap." Holmes's lips curved faintly. "A trap will turn against them, Watson. They think we're cornered, but we have the stone. That's our leverage." Carver, weak but determined, leaned on Watson. "The chapel's old, half-collapsed. They use the crypt below. It's like a maze, tunnels, traps. I heard them talk about it." Holmes nodded, his lantern dim to avoid notice. "Then we go under. The crypt's their true sanctuary." The chapel loomed ahead, its broken spire jagged against the foggy sky. Its walls were crumbling, ivy choking the stone. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. Holmes scanned the ground, finding fresh footprints, boots heavy and hurried, marked with mud. "They're here," he whispered. "Stay sharp." They slipped through a shattered window, the chapel's interior a ruin of splintered pews and fallen beams. Moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, casting eerie shadows. Holmes led them to a stone slab in the floor, etched with the crimson symbol, a circle with a slash. He pressed the medallion into a hidden groove, and the slab rumbled, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Watson's heart pounded. "Another tunnel. More traps?" Holmes nodded, his lantern casting a faint glow. "Likely. Carver, stay between us. Watson, cover the rear." They descended, the air growing colder, thicker with the stench of mold and something metallic. Blood, perhaps. The staircase ended in a narrow tunnel, its walls carved with ancient symbols, the crimson mark repeating like a pulse. Holmes moved, slowly, his eyes catching faint seams in the floor. Pressure plates likely tied to blades or worse. "Careful," he said, stepping over a trap. "The Brotherhood guards its secrets well." The tunnel opened into a vast crypt, its ceiling supported by crumbling arches. Torches flickered, casting light on a stone altar at the center, surrounded by robed figures in red scarves and ribbons. Madame Vestra stood before the altar, her gray hair gleaming, her red sash stark. The air hummed with low chants, the words foreign and sharp. Holmes doused his lantern, pulling Watson and Carver into the shadows. "The ritual," he whispered. "They're preparing, but the stone's with us." Vestra's voice rose, cutting through the chants. "The seventh star shines. Bring the stone or our power fades for another 7 years." A figure stepped forward, the herald, their white mask glinting, a black scarf wrapped tight. "Holmes has it," they said, their voice muffled but cold. "He's here somewhere." Vestra's eyes scanned the crypt, her face a mask of fury. "Find him. Kill him. The ritual must proceed." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver, but Holmes signaled him to wait. "We need Vestra," he whispered. "She's the key to stopping this." Carver's voice shook. "The altar. It's where they'll use the stone. Blood makes it work." Holmes nodded, his mind racing. He pulled the stone of Asher from his coat, its symbols catching the torchlight. "We disrupt the ritual. Watson, create a diversion. Carver, stay hidden." Watson nodded, creeping to a nearby pillar. He fired a shot into the ceiling, the crack echoing like thunder. The robed figures scattered, their chants breaking. Vestra spun, her eyes blazing, as the herald drew a blade, scanning the shadows. Holmes stepped forward, the stone held high. "Looking for this, Vestra?" Her face twisted with rage. "You fool! You can't stop us!" The herald lunged, their blade flashing, but Holmes dodged, tossing the stone to Watson, who caught it mid-air. "Run!" Holmes shouted, drawing his knife to meet the herald's attack. Watson bolted, the stone heavy in his hands, Carver stumbling behind. The crypt's tunnels branched, and Watson chose one at random, the Brotherhood's shouts close. A trap triggered. A blade swung from the wall, grazing his sleeve. He pushed Carver ahead, dodging another trap, a spike shooting from the floor. Holmes grappled with the herald, their mask slipping to reveal a scarred cheek. "Who are you?" he demanded, but they broke free, vanishing into the chaos. Vestra screamed orders, her followers closing in. Watson reached a dead end, a locked iron gate marked with the crimson symbol. He fumbled with the medallion, its key fitting the lock. The gate opened, revealing a small chamber, its walls lined with ancient bones. An altar stood at the center, empty but stained with blood. Carver gasped. This is the true sanctuary, where they keep the stone." Watson set the stone on the altar, his heart racing. "We can't let them have it." Holmes burst in, bloodied but alive, the Brotherhood's shouts echoing behind. "Watson, the stone, destroy it." Before Watson could act, Vestra appeared, her pistol raised. "You've lost, Holmes, the stone is ours." Holmes smiled, cold and sharp. "Not yet." He kicked a hidden lever and the floor rumbled, a trap triggering. A cascade of stones fell, blocking the gate. Vestra screamed, trapped outside as the chamber shook. Watson grabbed the stone, smashing it against the altar. It cracked, its symbols dimming. "Is that it?" he panted. Holmes nodded, his face grim. "For now, but Vestra's still out there, and the Brotherhood won't stop." They fled through a side tunnel, the crypt collapsing behind them. The fog above welcomed them, hiding their escape. The stone was broken, but Vestra's rage burned, and the herald's shadow lingered, a promise of vengeance in the underworld's depths. Chapter 15. The Crimson Ritual. The fog swallowed the whopping streets as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. John Watson, and Thomas Carver stumbled from the collapsing crypt beneath the ruined chapel. The stone of Asher, now cracked and dim, was clutched in Watson's hands, its ancient symbols barely visible in the moonlight. Holmes's wounded arm bled through its bandage, but his eyes burned with determination, the medallion still in his pocket. The Brotherhood's chants echoed faintly behind them, cut off by the rumble of falling stone, but Madame Vestra's rage lingered in the air like a storm. Watson panted, supporting Carver, whose strength was fading fast. "Holmes, the stone's broken. Is that it?" Did we stop the ritual? Holmes's face was grim, his voice low. We've delayed them, Watson. The stone's power is weakened, but Vestra's not done. She'll find another way. Carver's voice rasped, his eyes wide, with fear. The ritual, it's not just the stone, it's the blood, the chant. Vestra, she's the heart of it. Without her, they fail. They slipped through an alley, the fog their only shield. The docks were close, the smell of salt and tar cutting through the damp. Holmes led them to a small warehouse, its door ajar, a temporary refuge. Inside, the air was thick with dust, crates stacked high. Holmes barred the door, his lantern casting a weak glow. We can't stay long, he said, examining the cracked stone in Watson's hands. The Brotherhood will hunt us. Vestra's desperate now. She'll risk everything to reclaim this. Watson set the stone on a crate, his revolver ready. What's our move? We can't keep running. Holmes pulled the ancient book De Potentia Lapidus from his coat, flipping to a marked page. The ritual requires 3 elements, the stone, the keeper's chant, and blood under the 7th star. We've damaged the stone, but Vestra's still free, and the stars hold for a few hours yet. Carver slumped against a crate, his face pale. They'll try again. There's a backup site, a vault under an old manor in Shadwell. I heard them whisper about it. If they get the stone back. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Then we go to Shadwell. We stop Vestra before she starts the ritual. Watson's jaw tightened. Holmes, you're hurt. Carver's barely standing. We need help. Lestrade, the police. Holmes shook his head. No time. The police would blunder in and scatter the Brotherhood, leaving Vestra free to vanish. This ends tonight. A faint noise outside, a shuffle of boots, made them freeze. Watson doused the lantern, gripping his revolver. Holmes peered through a crack in the wall, spotting shadows in the fog, red scarves, moving silently, and a taller figure, masked. The Herald. They've found us, Holmes whispered. Watson, cover the door. Carver, stay down. Watson positioned himself, revolver aimed. Holmes slipped to a side window, his knife ready. The door rattled, a blade scraping the lock. Then a voice, Vestra's, cold and commanding. Holmes, you can't hide. Give me the stone or we burn this place with you in it. Holmes stepped into the open, the cracked stone in his hand. You want it, Vestra? Come and take it. The door burst open and the Herald lunged, their white mask gleaming, blade flashing. Holmes dodged, his knife meeting theirs in a clash of steel. Watson fired, clipping a red-scarved figure who screamed and fell. Vestra stood back, her red sash stark, chanting low words that made the air hum. She's starting the ritual, Carver hissed, his voice panicked. Holmes grappled with the Herald, their mask slipping further, revealing a scarred jaw and piercing eyes. Who are you? Holmes demanded, but the Herald broke free, retreating to Vestra's side. Watson fired, again keeping the others at bay. Holmes grabbed the stone, tossing it to Carver. Hide it, he shouted, then tackled a red-scarved attacker, pinning them to the floor. Vestra's chant grew louder, her hands raised, blood dripping from a cut on her palm. The stone in Carver's hands flickered, its symbols glowing faintly despite the cracks. Watson's heart raced. Holmes, she's doing it, without the altar. Holmes kicked the attacker away, lunging for Vestra. Stop her, he shouted. Watson fired at the ceiling, debris falling to disrupt the chant. Vestra staggered, her voice faltering, but the Herald was on Holmes, their blades slashing his already wounded arm. Holmes grunted, blood soaking his sleeve, but he fought, back knocking the Herald's mask free. The face beneath was scarred, male, with eyes burning with fanatical zeal. You're too late, the Herald snarled, diving for the stone. Carver screamed, clutching it as Watson tackled the Herald, pinning them to the ground. Holmes grabbed Vestra, wrenching her arm to stop the chant. It's over, he said, his voice hard. Your ritual's broken. Vestra laughed, wild and desperate. You think this ends it? The Brotherhood is everywhere. The stone's power lives in us. Watson tied the Herald's hands, his revolver trained on Vestra. "Where's the vault in Shadwell?" he demanded. Vestra's eyes glinted. "You'll never find it. The ritual's begun and blood will finish it." A sudden crash echoed. The warehouse door splintered by more Brotherhood members. Holmes grabbed the stone from Carver, shoving Watson toward a back exit. "Go! The vault's our only chance!" They ran, the fog hiding their escape as Vestra's laughter followed. The streets of Shadwell were a maze, but Carver's memory guided them to a derelict manor, its gates rusted, its windows dark. Holmes found a cellar door, the crimson symbol etched faintly. The medallion opened it, revealing a tunnel leading down. The vault below was a stone chamber, its walls lined with skulls, an altar at the center glowing with candlelight. The crimson symbol dominated the floor, wet with fresh blood. Vestra's voice echoed behind them. She'd followed, her red sash like a wound in the dark. "You can't stop it," she said, stepping into the vault, the herald at her side, freed somehow. "The stone's power is ours." Holmes held the cracked stone high. It's broken, Vestra, your ritual's a lie." She lunged, but Holmes was faster, smashing the stone against the altar. It shattered, its glow fading. Vestra screamed, her followers faltering. Watson fired, scattering them as Holmes tackled the herald, pinning them. "It's over," Holmes said, his voice cold. "Your power's gone." Vestra's eyes burned, but she fled, the herald struggling free to follow. The Brotherhood scattered into the tunnels, their ritual broken. Watson helped Carver up, the vault silent now. "Did we do it, Holmes?" Holmes' face was pale, bloodied, but resolute. "For now. But Vestra's alive, and the Brotherhood's not finished. We've won a battle, not the war." As they climbed back to the fog, the shattered stone's dust clung to their hands, a reminder of the Crimson Brotherhood's lingering threat. Chapter 16. Betrayal at Midnight. The fog draped Shadwell in a heavy, suffocating veil, muffling the distant clatter of the Thames as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. John Watson, and Thomas Carver emerged from the manor's vault. The shattered remains of the Stone of Asher lay behind them, its ancient power broken, but the Crimson Brotherhood's threat lingered like a shadow. Holmes's wounded arm throbbed, blood seeping through his bandage, yet his eyes burned with relentless focus. Watson gripped his revolver, his heart still racing from the chaos, while Carver stumbled, his face pale, his strength nearly spent. Watson's voice was low, urgent. "Holmes, we destroyed the stone. Vestra's gone, the ritual stopped. Can we finally breathe?" Holmes's lips tightened, his gaze scanning the foggy street. "The stone was their focus, Watson, but Vestra's the heart. She's fled, not defeated. The Brotherhood will regroup." Carver's voice trembled. "She'll come for me. I betrayed them. Told you too much." Holmes turned to him, his voice firm. "You're under our protection, Carver. But we need more. Where will Vestra go next?" Carver shook his head, his eyes wide. "I don't know. They never told me everything. Just whispers about a safe house somewhere in Limehouse, near the river." Holmes nodded, pulling the medallion from his pocket, its crimson symbol dull in the moonlight. "Limehouse, then. We find her before she finds us." They moved through the fog, the streets a maze of narrow alleys and looming warehouses. The air smelled of coal and river muck, the silence broken only by their footsteps. Watson kept his revolver ready, his senses sharp for any hint of red scarves or the herald's masked face. Holmes led, his lantern dim, his mind tracing the map from the old library. They reached Limehouse, the river's edge a dark ribbon through the fog. A row of crumbling buildings lined the water, their windows black. Carver pointed to one, its door marked with a faint crimson slash. "There," he whispered. "I saw that mark once on a crate they shipped." Holmes examined the door, finding fresh scratches on the lock. "Recently used," he said, slipping his tool into the lock. It clicked open, revealing a dark, musty interior. The air inside was thick with the smell of wax and incense, a faint chant echoing from below. "Another ritual?" Watson whispered, his grip tightening. Holmes shook his head. No, a meeting. They're planning their next move. They crept inside, finding a staircase leading to a basement. The chants grew louder, a low hum that made Watson's skin crawl. Holmes doused the lantern, relying on the faint glow from below. At the bottom, a heavy curtain hid a room lit by candles, their light flickering on robed figures in red scarves. Madame Vestra stood at the center, her gray hair loose, her red sash stained with blood from her wounded hand. "We've lost the stone," she said, her voice sharp. "But our purpose remains. The herald will lead us now." The herald stepped forward, their white mask gone, revealing a scarred face, male with eyes like burning coals. "Holmes thinks he's won," he said, his voice cold. "But we have another way. The blood of a traitor will suffice." Watson's heart sank. "They mean Carver," he whispered. Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "We need to act. Watson, create a diversion. Carver, stay behind me." Watson nodded, slipping to the side. He kicked over a stack of crates, the crash echoing. The figures spun, drawing knives, as Vestra's eyes narrowed. "Holmes," she hissed. "He's here!" Holmes stepped into the light, the medallion raised. "Your stone's gone, Vestra. Your ritual's dead." The herald lunged, blade flashing, but Holmes dodged, his knife meeting the attack. Watson fired a warning shot, scattering the robed figures. Carver froze, his eyes wide with terror as Vestra grabbed a dagger, her chant rising again. Different words, darker, pulling at the air. "She's trying something new," Carver shouted. "It's not the stone, it's blood." Holmes tackled, the herald pinning him, but Vestra's chant grew louder, her dagger raised over a small altar. A figure was dragged forward, bound. Emily Carver, her face bruised, her eyes wide with fear. "Thomas," she cried, "help me." Carver lunged, but Watson grabbed him, pulling him back. "It's a trap," Watson hissed. Holmes knocked the herald down, turning to Vestra. "Let her go, Vestra, this ends now." Vestra laughed, her dagger at Emily's throat. "You broke the stone, Holmes, but blood is enough, a traitor's blood, his or hers." Watson aimed his revolver, but the robed figures closed in, knives gleaming. Holmes's mind raced. He saw the betrayal in Vestra's eyes, the herald's cunning, and Emily's terror. "Carver," he said, his voice low. "Where's the safe house's back exit?" Carver stammered. Behind the altar. A tunnel." Holmes nodded, signaling Watson. "Now." Watson fired into the ceiling. Dust and debris falling. Holmes grabbed Emily, pulling her from Vestra's grasp as the herald lunged again. Carver led them to the altar, shoving it aside to reveal a hidden trapdoor. They scrambled through, the tunnel narrow and damp, the Brotherhood's shouts close. Behind. They emerged into a foggy alley, Emily trembling but unharmed. Watson supported her, his revolver still raised. "Holmes, they'll keep coming." "What now?" Holmes's face was grim, blood dripping from his arm. "Vestra's desperate. She's using blood, not the stone. We need to find their true leader. The herald's just a pawn." Carver's voice shook. "The herald. He was one of us. A clerk, like me. But he turned, joined Vestra. He knows everything I know." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Then he's the betrayal we didn't see. We go back to Baker Street, fortify it, and draw them out. This time we end it." As they vanished into the fog, Emily clinging to her brother, the Brotherhood's chants faded, but the herald's scarred face lingered. In Holmes's mind, a traitor turned predator ready to strike at midnight's heart. Chapter 17. The Locked Vault. The fog swirled through Limehouse's alleys, a damp curtain that hid the hurried steps of Sherlock Holmes, Dr. John Watson, Thomas Carver, and Emily Carver, as they fled the Brotherhood's safe house. The air was sharp, with river muck and fear, the echo of Madame Vestra's chant still ringing in their ears. Holmes clutched his wounded arm, blood soaking his sleeve, but his mind was a fortress, locked on the Crimson Brotherhood's betrayal. The herald, once a clerk like Carver, had turned traitor, his scarred face a grim reminder that the enemy was closer than ever. Baker Street was their only refuge, a place to regroup and plan. Watson gripped his revolver, supporting Emily, whose bruised face was set with defiance despite her ordeal. "Holmes," he whispered. "Vestra's using blood now, not the stone. What's her endgame?" Holmes's voice was low, edged with steel. "Power, Watson. The stone was a tool, but blood's their true currency. She'll sacrifice anyone, Carver, Emily, to fuel her ritual. We need to draw her out, expose her." Carver, leaning on Watson, his voice trembled. "The Herald. James, his name was. He worked with me, asked questions, acted scared. I trusted him, told him everything." Holmes's eyes flicked to Carver, sharp. "He used you to get to the Brotherhood. What else does he know? Their plans, their hiding places?" Carver shook, his head, his face ashen. "Just fragments. James mentioned a vault, not the one in Shadwell. Somewhere old, secret, said it holds their sacred relics." I thought he was joking. Holmes's jaw tightened. "No jokes. The vault's their core. We find Vestra's secrets." They reached Baker Street, the fog thicker now, muffling the gas lamp's glow. Inside 221B, Mrs. Hudson gasped at their state, bloodied, battered, Emily's face a patchwork of bruises. "Good heavens," she cried. "What's happened?" "No. Time," Holmes said, barring the door. "Mrs. Hudson, fetch bandages, hot water. Watson, check the windows." Watson nodded, securing the shutters as Emily helped Carver to the sofa. Holmes spread the map from the old library, its tunnel lines crisscrossing London. The ancient book, De Potentia Lapidis, lay beside it, its pages dog-eared from their desperate study. "Carver," he said, "this vault, where is it?" "Think." Carver's eyes distant, fogged with pain. "James said it's deep, under an old guild hall near the tower. I never saw it, but he bragged about its locks. Impossible to crack." Holmes traced a finger over the map, pausing near the Tower of London. "The Guild Hall of St. Catherine's, abandoned years ago. Perfect for secrets." He turned to the book, flipping to a passage on blood rituals. "The Crimson Brotherhood seals its power in a vault of bone, locked by 3 keys, opened only by blood of the keeper and traitor." Watson, bandaging Emily's wrists, frowned. "3 keys? We've only got the medallion." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The medallion's one. Vestra likely has another. The third, perhaps the Herald, or something we've missed." A sudden thud outside, a stone against the window, made them jump. Watson grabbed his revolver, peering through a shutter. "Red scarves," he muttered. "They're circling." Holmes stood, his voice calm but urgent. "They're probing. We fortify here, then move at first light. The vault's our target, but we need to know Vestra's next step." Emily's voice, steady despite her fear, cut in. "They took me to a cellar before the safe house. I heard Vestra talking about a final rite. She said it needs 2 bloods, Thomas's and someone close to him." Carver paled. "Me and Emily. They wanted us both." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "A blood bond. Vestra's desperate, improvising. Since we broke the stone, she's using family ties to amplify the ritual." A soft knock, 2 quick taps, 1 slow, came at the door. Watson opened it, revealing Wiggins, his face pale, slingshot in hand. "Mr. Holmes, they're close. Saw the Herald near the dock street, masked again. They're whispering quiet, like ghosts." Holmes nodded, tossing Wiggins a coin. "Stay, sharp Wiggins. Watch the street. If they move, signal us." Wiggins vanished into the fog. Holmes turned to the group. "We rest for an hour, then head for the guild hall. Watson, you and I'll scout the vault. Emily, Carver, you stay here with Mrs. Hudson." Watson protested. "Holmes, you're bleeding again. You can't." Holmes cut him off, his voice hard. "We must. The Brotherhood won't wait." At dawn, the fog thinned, revealing a gray, cold London. Holmes and Watson slipped out, leaving Carver and Emily barricaded in 221B. The Guild Hall of St. Catherine's was a squat, forgotten building near the tower, its door boarded up. Holmes pried a board loose, revealing a lock etched with the crimson symbol. The medallion clicked, but the door didn't budge. 2 more keys, Holmes muttered, examining 3 slots in the lock. The vaults below. They squeezed inside, finding a dusty hall, its walls lined with faded guild crests. A trap door lay hidden under a rug, marked with a crimson slash. Holmes opened it, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. The air grew colder, thicker with the scent of bone and rust. They descended, Holmes' lantern casting shadows on walls carved with skulls. The vault loomed, a massive stone door, its 3 locks gleaming, unyielding. Holmes pressed the medallion into one, but the others stayed shut. "Vestra has the others," he said, "or the herald." A voice echoed behind them, cold, muffled. "You're right, Holmes." The herald stepped from the shadows, masked, a blade in one hand, a second key glinting in the other. "But you're not leaving this vault." Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes signaled calm. "James, isn't it? You betrayed Carver. Why?" The herald's eyes glinted through the mask. "Power. Vestra promised it. The vault holds more than relics. Scrolls, secrets to bend the city to our will. You can't stop us." Holmes's voice was sharp. "The stone's gone. Your ritual's broken." The herald laughed, low and bitter. "The stone was a prop. The vault's true power is blood. Carver's yours, mine." Vestra's waiting. A second figure appeared. Vestra, her red sash bloodied, holding the third key. "You've played well, Holmes," she said, her voice venomous. "But the ritual begins now." Watson fired, but the herald dodged, lunging at Holmes. Vestra slipped her key into the lock, chanting low words that made the air. The vault door rumbled, cracking open, as a wave of cold hit, like death itself. Holmes tackled the herald, wrenching the second key free, but Vestra's chant grew, the vault door grinding wider. Watson grabbed Holmes, pulling him back as the herald slashed, the blade missing by inches. "We need to stop her," Watson shouted. Holmes clutched the second key, his face fierce. "The vault's open, but we can't let her finish. Back to Baker Street. Carver's blood is the final piece." Thereafter, they ran, the vault's chill chasing them, Vestra's laughter echoing. The herald vanished into the shadows, their betrayal complete. Back at 221B, Emily and Carver waited, unaware that the Brotherhood's ritual was shifting, Vestra's blood magic drawing them into a deadly trap. Chapter 18. The Blood of Traitors. The fog clung to Baker Street like a shroud, its gray tendrils muffling the dawn's faint light as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson burst into 221B. The air inside was heavy with fear, the splintered door a grim reminder of the Crimson Brotherhood's reach. Thomas Carver sat by the fire, pale and trembling, while Emily Carver gripped a knife, her bruised face set with resolve. Mrs. Hudson hovered, her hands wringing, as Holmes barred the door, his wounded arm dripping blood. The second key rested. From the herald glinted in his hand, a cold promise of the vault's secrets. Watson panted, his revolver still warm. "Holmes, that vault. Vestra's opening it. What's inside? More than scrolls, I'd wager." Holmes' eyes burned, his voice low. "Power, Watson. The Brotherhood's true strength lies in what's locked away, rituals, relics, or worse. Vestra's chant was blood magic fueled by betrayal. She needs Carver's blood, or Emily's, to finish it." Carver's voice cracked. "Me? Why me?" Holmes turned to him, sharp. "You betrayed them, Thomas. Your blood tied to their rituals is potent. Emily's as your kin doubles the power. Vestra's desperate now, improvising without the stone of Asher." Emily's grip tightened on her knife. "Let them come, I'm not afraid." Holmes' lips twitched faintly. "Brave, but we can't stay. The vault's open and Vestra's close. We need to draw her away from it, force her hand." Watson frowned, checking his revolver's rounds. "How? We're outnumbered, and you're bleeding like a stuck pig." Holmes pulled the medallion, and the second key, setting them beside the ancient book, De Potentia Lapidis. "We use bait. The key's the medallion. They think we have the third. We lure Vestra to us, away from the vault." A soft tap at the window made them jump. Watson peered out, spotting Wiggins, his face smudged, slingshot ready. "Mr. Holmes," he hissed through the crack. "Red scarves moving fast, heading this way. That masked one's with him near the corner. Holmes nodded. Good. Wiggins, spread word we're heading to the docks. Make it loud, then hide. Wiggins vanished into the fog. Holmes turned to the group. We fortify here for now, but we prepare to move. Watson, barricade the windows. Emily, Carver, pack light. We're not coming back soon. As they worked, Holmes flipped through the book, his eyes scanning a passage. The vault of bone opens with 3 keys, but closes with blood of the keeper and traitor. Without both, its power consumes all. He paused, his face grim. Vestra's risking everything. If she fails, the ritual could destroy her and us. Watson shoved a table against a window, his voice tight. Then we make sure she fails. What's the plan? Holmes held up the second key. We let Vestra think we're running to the docks with the keys. She'll follow, leaving the vault exposed. We double back, seal it with her own blood. Emily's voice shook. Her blood? How? Holmes's eyes darkened. We wound her just enough. The vault's magic will do the rest. A sudden crash shook the door, the barricade groaning. Watson grabbed his revolver, positioning himself. They're here! Holmes slipped the medallion to Carver. Hide it, Thomas. They'll think I have it. The door splintered, and the herald burst in, mask gleaming, blade raised. Behind him, red-scarved, figures poured through, their knives flashing. Watson fired, dropping one, but the herald was fast, dodging toward Holmes. Emily swung her knife, catching a scarf-wearer's arm, while Carver scrambled behind the sofa. Holmes met the herald, their blades clashing. James, he said, voice cold. You chose the wrong side. The herald's scarred eyes burned through the mask. You'll die for this, Holmes. A scream cut through. Vestra outside, her voice rising in a chant. The air hummed, heavy with power, as candles in the room flickered unnaturally. Watson fired again, keeping the scarves at bay, but Vestra's voice grew, pulling at their minds, like a tide. She's starting, Carver shouted, clutching the medallion. She doesn't need the vault. Holmes kicked the herald back, his eyes flicking to the window. Watson, the roof. We escape and draw them out. Watson nodded, shoving Emily and Carver toward the stairs. Holmes grabbed the book, tucking the second key inside, and followed, trading blows with the herald. They reached the attic, scrambling onto the fog-slick roof. The chants followed, Vestra's voice a dark thread in the mist. Watson helped Carver, his revolver ready. Where to, Holmes? The docks, Holmes said, leaping to a neighboring roof. We stick to the plan, make them think we're running. They moved across rooftops, the fog hiding them, the Brotherhood's shouts below. Vestra's chant faded, but her presence lingered, a predator in the mist. At the docks they dropped to the ground, the Sparrow looming nearby. Holmes paused, scanning the shadows. They're close, he whispered. Watson, take Carver and Emily to the ship. Hide, but be ready. Watson frowned. And you? Holmes's eyes gleamed. I'm bait. Vestra wants me. I'll lead her to the guild hall, back to the vault. Watson grabbed his arm. You're not facing her alone. Holmes's voice was firm. You protect them, Watson. I'll handle Vestra. Reluctantly, Watson nodded, leading Carver and Emily to the Sparrow. Holmes slipped into the fog, the second key in his pocket, his knife ready. He doubled back toward the guild hall, leaving a deliberate trail, scuffed dirt, a torn cloth, to draw the Brotherhood. At the guild hall, the vault's chill greeted him, its stone door still cracked open. Vestra's voice echoed from within, her chant now a scream of rage. Holmes, you can't stop us. He stepped inside, the second key raised. I already have Vestra. Your stone's dust, your ritual's failing. She stood by the altar, blood dripping from her hand, the third key in her grasp. The herald flanked her, maskless now, his scarred face twisted with hate. You're alone, he sneered. No one's coming. Holmes smiled, cold and sharp. Am I? A crack rang. Out, Watson, from the shadows, his revolver trained on Vestra. Carver and Emily stood behind, the medallion in Carver's hand. Drop the key, Vestra, Watson said. Vestra's eyes widened, but she laughed, wild and desperate. You think blood needs a vault? It's here. She slashed her hand, blood splattering the altar, her chant peaking. The air roared, the vault shaking. Holmes lunged, wrenching the third key from her, but the herald tackled him, their blades locked. Watson fired, grazing the herald, who screamed but fought on. Carver shoved the medallion into the altar's lock, twisting it. The vault door groaned, sealing shut. Vestra's chant broke, her blood sizzling on the altar. No, she screamed, collapsing, her power draining. The herald fled, vanishing, into the tunnels. Holmes panted, bloodied but standing. The vault sealed. Her blood locked it. Watson helped Carver, Emily clinging to her brother. Is it over? Holmes's face was grim. Vestra's down, but the herald's alive. The Brotherhood's wounded, not dead. Chapter 19. The Last Stand. The first light of dawn pierced the thinning fog over London, casting a pale glow on the cobbled streets, as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. John Watson, Thomas Carver, and Emily Carver made their way back to Baker Street. The vault beneath the Guildhall of St. Catherine's was sealed, Madame Vestra's blood magic thwarted, and the Crimson Brotherhood's ritual broken. Yet the air remained heavy with unease. The herald, James, had escaped into the shadows, his scarred face a lingering threat. Holmes clutched the third key, wrested from Vestra, its cold metal a reminder that the Brotherhood's secrets were not yet fully unveiled. Watson supported Carver, whose face was gaunt, his steps unsteady. Emily walked close, her knife tucked in her belt, her eyes scanning the streets for red scarves. Holmes, Watson said, his voice low. Vestra's down, the stones destroyed, the vault's locked. Can we call this a victory? Holmes' wounded arm throbbed, blood crusting his sleeve, but his gaze was sharp. A victory, Watson, but not the war. The herald's free and the Brotherhood's reach is deep. They'll regroup, and James knows too much. Carver's voice was a whisper. James, he was my friend. I told him about the shipments, the symbols. He used me to climb their ranks. Holmes's eyes flicked to him. Then you'll help us find him. He's the key to ending this. They reached 221B. The door still splintered from the Brotherhood's assault. Mrs. Hudson met them, her face pale with worry. Mr. Holmes, you're hurt again. And Miss Carver, oh, what's happened? Bandages, Mrs. Hudson, Holmes said, his tone brisk. And tea. We've work to do. Inside. The sitting room was a fortress of barricades. The ancient book De Potentia Lapidus open on the table, its pages marked with notes on blood rituals and the vault of bone. Holmes set the third key beside the medallion, their crimson symbols, glinting. Watson patched Holmes's arm, his hand steady but his face grim. You're pushing too hard, Holmes. You need rest. Holmes waved him off, flipping through the book. No time. The herald's planning something. Vestra's defeat will force his hand. Emily sat by her brother, her voice firm. What's in the vault? You said scrolls, relics. Could James want them? Holmes nodded, his eyes on a passage. The vault of bone holds the Brotherhood's heart, scrolls of dominion, bound in blood, to command the weak. The scrolls, he said. If they hold rituals like the Stone of Ashers, James could rebuild the Brotherhood's power. A sharp tap at the window broke the silence. Watson grabbed his revolver, but it was Wiggins, his face smudged, eyes wide. Mr. Holmes, found him, the herald. He's at the old fish market near the docks. Got red scarves with him, moving crates. Looked sneaky. Holmes stood, his face set. Good work, Wiggins. Stay here, keep watch. Watson, round. The fish market, why there? Holmes grabbed his coat. A staging ground. James is gathering resources. Men, weapons, maybe a new ritual. We end this now. Carver's voice shook. You can't face him alone. He's different now. Like Vestra, but colder. Holmes's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. Not alone. Watson, Emily, with me. Carver, stay with Mrs. Hudson. You're too weak to fight. Carver nodded reluctantly, clutching Emily's hand. Be careful. The fish market was a sprawl of damp stalls and rotting crates, the air thick with the stench of fish and salt. The fog lingered, hiding their approach as Holmes, Watson, and Emily crept through the shadows. Holmes's lantern was dim, his knife ready, the third key in his pocket. Watson's revolver glinted and Emily's knife was steady in her grip. They spotted movement, a group of red-scarved figures loading crates into a cart, their voices low. At the center stood the herald, maskless, his scarred face stark in the owl. Lantern light. He held a scroll, its edges stained with blood, reading aloud in a low rhythmic chant. He's starting a ritual, Holmes whispered. No altar, no stone, just blood and words. Watson's jaw tightened. We stop him now, Holmes signaled, and they moved, silent as ghosts. Watson fired a warning shot, scattering the scarves. The herald spun, his eyes locking on Holmes. You, he snarled, clutching the scroll. You can't stop what's begun. Holmes stepped forward, his voice cold. Your vault's sealed, James. Vestra's broken. You're alone. The herald laughed, his blade flashing as he lunged. Holmes dodged, their knives clashing, sparks flying. Watson fired again, dropping a scarf wearer, while Emily tackled another, her knife swift. The market erupted in chaos, crates splintering, shouts echoing. The herald's chant resumed, his blood dripping onto the scroll, the air humming with power. Watson's skin crawled, a strange pull tugging at his mind. Holmes, he's doing it, some kind of control. Holmes grappled with the herald, wrenching the scroll free. Emily, burn it, he shouted, tossing it to her. Emily grabbed a lantern, smashing it onto the scroll. Flames roared, the blood-stained parchment curling to ash. The herald screamed, his chant breaking, the hum fading. Watson fired, grazing his shoulder. But the herald was relentless, slashing at Holmes, who staggered, blood seeping from a new wound. Watson tackled the herald, pinning him to the ground. It's over, James. Holmes stood, panting, clutching, the third key. Not yet. The Brotherhood scattered, but their ideas live. Emily helped Holmes, her face fierce. What now? Holmes's eyes scanned the market, the red scarves fleeing into the fog. We destroy their resources. These crates, burn them. They set the cart ablaze, flames licking the fog, the crates of scrolls and ritual tools reduced to ash. The herald, bound with rope, glared, his scarred face twisted with hate. You've won nothing, Holmes. The Brotherhood's everywhere. Holmes crouched, his voice low. Then we'll hunt you wherever you hide. They left the herald for the police, Lestrade's men arriving as the fire died. Back at 221B, Carver and Emily embraced, safe for now. Watson bandaged Holmes's new wounds, his voice heavy. Is it really over? Holmes stared into the fire, the medallion and keys on the table. The Brotherhood's wounded, Watson, but ideas don't die. James was a pawn, Vestra a queen. There's a king out there somewhere. Chapter 20. Shadows of the Brotherhood. The dawn light filtered through the lifting fog, painting Baker Street in hues of gray and gold as Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire in 221B, his wounded arm freshly bandaged. The medallion and the third key lay on the table, their crimson symbols dulled but ominous, relics of a battle won but a war unfinished. Dr. John Watson stood by the window, his revolver cleaned and reloaded, his eyes scanning the street for any lingering red scarves. Thomas, Carver and Emily Carver sat close, their faces etched with relief but shadowed by fear. The Crimson Brotherhood's ritual was broken, the Stone of Asher destroyed, and the herald, James, bound for Scotland Yard's cells, yet the air held a quiet menace. Watson turned, his voice steady but heavy. Holmes, we burned their scrolls, scattered their men. Vestra's gone, James is caught. Can we call this done? Holmes's gaze was fixed on the fire, his pipe unlit in his hand. Done, Watson? The Brotherhood's roots run deep. We've cut branches, not the trunk. James spoke of a greater power, a king behind Vestra's queen. They'll rise again. Carver's voice trembled, his hands clasped tight. What do they want? The stone's gone, The vault's sealed. Why keep fighting? Holmes leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Power, Carver, not just over men's minds, but over London itself, its wealth, its secrets. The scrolls we burned were only part of their arsenal. The vault of bone holds more, and someone will come for it. Emily's face hardened, her knife now sheathed but close. Then we find this king. Stop them for good. Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. Bold, Miss Carver, but we need more than courage. We need their trail. Mrs. Hudson entered, carrying a tray of tea, her face still pale from the night's chaos. Mr. Holmes, a letter came, just now, slipped under the door. No name, no mark. Holmes took the envelope, plain but heavy, and opened it with a careful slice of his knife. Inside was a single sheet written in a precise, unfamiliar hand. The game continues, Holmes. The Brotherhood thanks you for clearing the board. The vault waits, and so do we. A crimson slash marked the bottom, the Brotherhood symbol. Watson's jaw tightened. They're taunting us even now. Holmes folded the note, his face unreadable. Not a taunt, Watson, a challenge. They're regrouping, and this king is watching. A knock at the door, sharp, urgent, made them tense. Watson gripped his revolver, but Holmes signaled calm, opening the door to reveal Wiggins, his cap askew, breath short. Mr. Holmes, trouble at the docks. Found a body. Red scarf, throat cut. Note pinned to him says for Holmes. Holmes, eyes narrowed. Show me. They followed Wiggins to the docks, the morning air sharp with salt and coal. Near a warehouse, a crowd of dock workers parted, revealing a slumped figure, blood pooling beneath. The man's red scarf was stained darker, a dagger pinning a note to his chest. Holmes knelt, pulling it free. The same precise hand. Traitors, die. The vault's ours. Find us if you dare. Watson's stomach churned. They're killing their own now. Why? Holmes examined the body, noting fresh bruises, a broken finger. This man talked, or tried to. They're purging weaknesses, consolidating under new leadership. Carver, pale but standing, whispered, James. He said the Brotherhood was everywhere, in offices, taverns, even the police. Holmes stood, pocketing the note. Then, we start there. Watson, we visit Scotland Yard. Lestrade's holding James. He may know more than he said. At Scotland Yard, Lestrade met them in a cramped office, his face weary. Holmes, your man's a tough nut. Won't talk, just laughs. Says the Brotherhood's bigger than we know. Holmes leaned forward. Let me see him. In the cell, James, the herald, sat chained, his scarred face twisted with defiance. Holmes, he sneered. Come to gloat? Holmes's voice was cold. Who's the king, James? Who leads now that Vestra's gone? James's eyes glinted, his laugh low. You think Vestra was the top? She was a servant. The king's untouchable, high up where you'll never reach. The vault's just the start. Holmes pressed. Where's the new ritual? What's in the vault? James leaned closer, his voice a whisper. Secrets to break London. Names, plans, power. Find the Black Crown Tavern, Limehouse. You'll see. Holmes turned to leave, but James called after him. You're marked, Holmes. The Brotherhood never forgets. Back at 221B, Holmes spread the map, circling Limehouse. The Black Crown, he said. A meeting place or a trap. We go tonight. Watson frowned, checking his revolver. Another fight? You're barely standing. Holmes's eyes burned. No choice, Watson. The Brotherhood's moving and we're their target. Emily stood, her voice firm. I'm coming. They took me, hurt Thomas. I want to end this. Carver nodded, weak but resolute. Me too. Know their ways. Holmes studied them, then nodded. Very well. But follow my lead. That night, the Black Crown Tavern was a dim, smoky den, its patrons rough and quiet. Holmes, Watson, Emily, and Carver slipped in, blending with the shadows. Holmes's eyes scanned the room, catching a flicker of red, a scarf tucked into a man's coat. At a corner table, a cloaked figure sat, their back to the wall, a black crown embroidered on their sleeve. Holmes approached, his voice low. "You're expecting me?" The figure turned, revealing a woman. Not Vestra, but older, her eyes sharp, a red ribbon in her hair. "Holmes," she said, her voice smooth. "You've caused trouble. Sit." Watson's hand hovered near his revolver, but Holmes sat, signaling calm. "You're the king?" She smiled, thin and cold. "A regent for now. The Brotherhood endures. You've broken our stone, sealed our vault, but we adapt. Join us, Holmes. Your mind, our cause, unstoppable." Holmes's voice was ice. "I'd rather burn your cause to ash." Her smile faded. "Then die." She snapped her fingers, and the room erupted. Red-scarved men rose, knives drawn. Watson fired, dropping one as Emily slashed with her knife, Carver shoving a table to block attackers. Holmes lunged at the woman, but she was fast, slipping through a hidden door. He followed, Watson behind, into a basement lined with crates. More, scrolls, ritual tools. The woman stood by an altar chanting, blood dripping from her hand. "Another ritual," Watson shouted, firing, but she dodged, her chant rising. Holmes tackled her, wrenching her dagger free. "Your brotherhood ends tonight." She laughed, bloodied but defiant. "You can't stop an idea, Holmes." Watson burned the crates, flames roaring. The tavern above emptied, screams fading into the fog. The woman slipped away in the chaos, her red ribbon left behind. Holmes stood, panting, the fire's heat on his face. Back at 221B, the dawn was quiet, the medallion and keys locked in a safe. Watson bandaged fresh cuts, his voice heavy. She escaped. The Brotherhood's still out there. Holmes stared out the window, the city waking. "They are, Watson, but we've struck deep. The regents wounded, their tools burned. We'll hunt them always." Carver and Emily sat close, safe but changed. The Crimson Brotherhood's shadows lingered, their king still hidden, but Holmes's resolve burned brighter than ever, a light against the darkness.